Sit right back, hear a tale of a fateful trip. It started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship.
Something not working right there, Charles. Hello.
Good to see you, Jason.
Good to see you. You know, there's always a million things I have to get exactly right on the outset, or we have a little. I didn't have my dissolve programmed properly. But Charles, welcome to Epstein's Islands, the tale of some castaways who set out on a fateful trip that was going to be a 3-hour tour, but turned into a giant pedophile conspiracy.
And should turn into a rest of life sentence.
Yeah, it's not looking that way so far, Charles. A lot of people, I think, have been pretty disappointed with the lack of prosecution, the lack of ability to actually hold the most important suspect in custody while they're waiting for him to reach trial. I think people, well, I can't speak for other people, but speaking for myself, having had no confidence in Barr at first, and then being willing to give him the benefit of the doubt after the successful conclusion of the Robert Mueller mistake, I'm back to now thinking that William Barr is doing nothing but protecting the interests of the Bush family and his friends from the Iran-Contra days.
Well, we're going to get into a bit of that, but I think the purpose of today's show, the overarching purpose, and again, fantastic job by the art and sound departments, is to draw attention to the fact that we're not, you know, as with anything else involving the Clintons, when a scandal occurs, they would like to serve up a scandal for you to concentrate on, so you miss the much bigger scandal around it. Mm-hmm. So this isn't just about Little St. James Island. It isn't just about Haiti. It isn't just about islands in the Caribbean. This is about a much larger scam that includes cronyism, diverting gigantic amounts of money for ostensibly green projects involving climate change and
green
stuff.
Projects?
Yeah, green projects. In places where just by coincidence, most of these islands, you know, or places where they choose to do this, are havens either for money laundering or child trafficking or drug smuggling, whatever else. And then when you look at this particular sliver or slice that we're going to get into today, this isn't about Democratic Republic of the Congo, a truly impoverished in economic terms place, rich in resources that have not yet been tapped. This is about corners of the world that are actually quite wealthy. Many of these Caribbean islands on world scale are quite substantial economies on a per capita basis, because the populations are so small and the tourist industry is so big, and you have to go country by country, but many of the countries, you know, have been developed for a while. So the notion that, you know, celebrities and billionaires and politicians are going to pile into planes and helicopters and ships and focus on these projects that sound so fantastic, you know, because they're going to save the globe, you know, it just sounds too good to be true. And the reason it sounds too good to be true is it isn't true.
Well, and when you said fantastic, I was thinking more along the lines of Twilight Zone than something that's super great.
Right, exactly.
A little too fantastic to believe.
Right, exactly, exactly. So Epstein, I think we are going to discover in time, was, you know, the center of being up to no good. I mean, he was. There's nothing particularly redeeming about this person. I would not refer to him as a gentleman. He is, you know, I hope he's dead. You know, there are some who believe maybe he isn't dead, but
that's something you don't often hear said.
Right.
I hope he's dead. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, because this is what we're going to discover here. That you know, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's, you know, the child who hasn't grown up and everything's new and, you know, so much hope and promise. These are souls and, you know, individuals that deserve to be protected from the scum around the earth, who will take the lives away. You know, the right to quiet enjoyment, peaceful enjoyment of your life. You abuse a little child, and you are destroying that person for the remainder of that person's life, and beyond that, there's a high probability that that person will turn around and abuse other children.
Exactly.
And so it's not a crime that you say, oh yeah, I slipped on a banana peel, you know, I knocked somebody, an old lady over in a crosswalk. No, this is really bad stuff, done by people who should have known a lot better, who have been marketing themselves around the world as being worthy of respect and honor, worthy of running for President of the United States, serving as President of the United States. And this is a saga that is not too disgusting to be told. It's a saga that sadly must be told, because if the people around the world who are prone to this kind of behavior believe that this is a marker that says you can do this and get away with it, then it's a moral hazard. It's an immoral hazard. It's only going to make people who are inclined to behave this way more brazen. Yeah, exactly. So we'll take people through what we know. Obviously, we don't know the whole story on Epstein yet, but we know a lot more than we knew last week. And as I said, this is a lot more than just about Epstein or one island. It's a big conspiracy.
There's information coming out constantly, Charles. As a matter of fact, I just did another video yesterday that I think a lot of people might have seen that was dealing with this really super strange appearance of Ghislaine, however we pronounce this person's name, appearance at the hamburger restaurant, which I think everybody knows there was a lot of photo manipulation, there was manipulation with the narrative that was given to the New York Post. I'm left wondering if the New York Post was aware that this was a false story. There's a lot of things that raise questions along those lines, and people have been watching it. So I hope that people will check that out and also go over to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and sponsor the show, because, Charles, I can't keep these shows going without the sponsorship of the viewers. We've heard a lot from that Google whistleblower, how Google blacklists various sites. So to answer the 2-year-long question of why don't I just do every show on YouTube and rely on advertising, the answer is YouTube will not allow that. And it really just underscores what I've been saying all along, is that we really need the individual sponsorship of the viewers to keep this kind of programming going, because the topics that you and I are discussing are not popular with the millionaires and billionaires.
Well, most of them. But now, for the benefit of people who will not know the background of some of these people, perhaps you should elaborate on
sure.
How the art department put this together and who these people are.
Well, this is another one of our great collaborations where you came up with the idea and then I executed. And I watched Gilligan's Island. I think I've probably seen every single episode of it. It was popular in reruns when I was a kid. And I remember being like, what the hell, black and white Gilligan's Island? So it spanned the transition to color. And actually the guy who created Gilligan's Island, his name is escaping me right now, but he also directed The Incredible Shrinking Man, and it came from outer space, which was a very popular 3D movie. The Incredible Shrinking Man was originally supposed to be 3D, but they canceled it because it came out in 1955 or something like that. That would have been a great movie in 3D, and if people haven't seen it, they should. But on Gilligan's Island, we have, of course, Mr. Epstein as the trusty first mate. And I thought that was appropriate because there really isn't a movie poster for Gilligan's Island. I had this memory of them all sort of standing on the beach with the crashed ship. But when I looked around the internet, that seemed like a composite memory that I had created. So I took the minnow from the opening of the show, added this wording so nobody would be confused, and I just got a nice royalty-free image of a beach and put our cast of characters in there. I figured Epstein really is the star of the show in this case, so he's an appropriate Gilligan, but of course the skipper is Les Wexner, the guy who's...
He looks like the skipper.
He does look like the skipper, but that's Les Wexner offering island charters. We've got, of course, Prince Andrew, who is making such a beeline to escape any association with this island that he's actually leaving motion blur in his tracks. We've got the venerable attorney, Mr. Alan Dershowitz, who I didn't know this until he personally told me. He and his wife have visited the island, so I have them depicted here as the millionaire and his wife. And of course, Ghislaine Maxwell as Marianne. I didn't have anybody to be the movie star, but the professor is the odd weirdo Marvin Minsky from MIT, who has been accused of traveling to the island and who coincidentally may have been responsible for let's call it co-opting certain ideas and technologies that David Hawkins developed while
Really?
at Schlumberger. David Hawkins was the first guy to tell me about this Marvin Minsky dude. So when he came up in the Epstein thing, I found that strange, and I wanted to include him as the professor who is messing with some Gilligan's Island invention here. And then, of course, we've got Bill Clinton, totally out of shape. I don't know what woman would want to have sex with him, but come on in, the water's fine. He's there on the island as he is known to be from time to time.
Very well done. Very well done, sir.
Thank you very much.
And now this, well, let's jump into the slide presentation. We're going to talk primarily about the Epstein situation, Clinton Foundation stuff, but we're also going to talk about GE because that was back in the news. So there is a school of thought on this sordid scandal involving Epstein that because he's dead, we're never going to learn the truth and it's just going to go away. I think with the publication of the trust and the assertion that it has over $550 million in it, that's going to, in contrast to the mainstream thing, I think that's going to bring everyone out of the shadows who wants a piece of that $550 million pie. And maybe some will be dragged reluctantly out of the shadows, but lawyers are going to look at that and accountants are going to look at that. They're going to say, no, that's for me.
Yeah.
And in addition, I do think as the public begins to see this for what it really was, it likely was a long-standing honey trap operation in which Epstein was unlikely to have been the brainchild, but instead was just the point person on it. It's likely, in my opinion, because this is probably, it obviously didn't have the internet in Roman times and Egyptian times, but this kind of, using, luring powerful people who you decide are corruptible into compromising positions that they wouldn't want to have to explain to a partner, to a wife, to a family, whatever. This is an old trick.
It's hard to imagine that many people wanting to have sex with a 14-year-old kid.
Well, whether 14 or even of age, the issue here is that the formula of saying the person's the president of the United States, married, got a daughter, in college, going to take a lot of shit in college from friends. This person is not going to want this secret out,
right?
And this person can decide, well, I think I'd like to nuke Sudan to distract, not nuke, but to drop bombs on Sudan and the aspirin factory to distract from them. This kind of stuff does happen, and I think, people. I unfortunately have met people like this in my life. And I've met one time. One of the worst business meetings I ever had was being sent in to ask a mercenary, would he like to invest in one of my projects? I was like, whoa, why did I do that? Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't get any money from him. But
he's presented to you as a mercenary?
A retired mercenary.
Oh, so that's okay.
He's out of the killing when he gets unhappy business, but I decided I didn't want to go near that guy again.
Wow. But I guess anybody who works for Blackwater is a mercenary, right?
Well, and all these suspicious contracting firms that we, the funny names that we do or do not know, the whole story on. So I think as we go into this political season, where, and we'll get into this in a second, but where I believe Donald Trump won the election in the last 24 hours, and I'll explain why in a second, but there's going to be a tremendous debate going on here with the people who look at this and say, this is the kind of crap, we cannot tolerate this anymore. And especially, if this were just Epstein and Wexner and Clinton and private people doing this kind of stuff, you'd be upset about it. But to think that our 17 security agencies had to know about this, and
they told Acosta about it.
Right, and the ones in Britain and the ones in France and the G7 team is all out there high and mightying it, If they didn't know about this, then maybe we just shut the 17 security agencies down.
And get a new one.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it should be pretty obvious that, little clues. A guy with a resume that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I nearly dropped the F-bomb. But, that kind of resume, suddenly this loser is living like, Marie Antoinette and in a modern sense. And suddenly all these celebrities from Bill Gates to Bill Clinton to, he's buying islands and mansions and flying in private planes and, and up until about 2002, nobody knew who he was. And it was only when he attracted immense publicity, basically hosting Bill Clinton's first illegal trips on behalf of the Clinton Foundation.
Somebody knew who he was.
Who's that?
That's Donald Barr, the father of the current Attorney General, with 3 and 3 pens separated by a divider. Many people have told me this is a covert 33.
Well, and that's probably in the headmaster's office at Dalton. Yeah. But again, Epstein did not join Dalton until after this guy had left.
But it was shortly after, wasn't it?
Well, it's a school year. So he would have left in June. Epstein starts in September.
I understand. The only thing that I ask is if you wanted to create a historical record that was, oh, that guy came in after I left, couldn't you cue him up to be hired and then leave? And
I don't think that. I don't know, and I have not yet satisfied that Epstein actually was employed as a full-time teacher in the September thing. I think he was more on the roster of tutors, but time will tell on that one. But anyway, what I was starting to say is that the big question here, when I say about the Clinton Foundation, the question is not, is it a fraud? The question is why nobody did anything about it,
right,
and why nobody still is doing anything about it as far as the public yet knows. With this, we will show in moments that this Epstein model goes way back in time, into the 70s, and probably before that. It's a changing cast of characters in both political parties, people who want to milk the government, people who want to get ever bigger black budgets so they can protect us all with their magical national security programs, and fraudsters who are attracted to this kind of stuff. I mean, there's a community. There are just people who grow up. I don't think they learn to become fraudsters. I mean, I think they're just born to be a fraudster.
Yeah.
Fraudster. Where did my wallet go? Well, that kid's only 2 years old. He couldn't have stolen my wallet. Right.
But it's true. You're joking, but there are people who can just play the piano. There are people who just know math.
Right.
People just know fraud.
Yeah, and I think the fraudster community. I mean, my last experience in banking, where I set up a firm with a guy, I was 38, he was 39. The number of fraudsters who heard it, because we had a nice profile, we had gotten like 50 investors from around the world, I think 7 royal families, a bunch of billionaires, a bunch of big firms and stuff. And so the word went out that these young guys in their late 30s in banking were going to build this business up. And the number of con artists that came with good recommendations through our door at 55th Street between Madison and Park. We had a two-story, we had a full floor place, nice, not ostentatiously kitted out, just nice, well located. The number of tall tales that came in to that place, it was as if the word just spread. Hey, here are these guys. They got access to the royal family, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and different places. Let's tell them a gigantic tale about what we can do. Hope they won't check any of it and see if we can steal the money.
Was it John Dillinger who they asked, why do you keep robbing banks? And he just said, that's where the money is, right?
Exactly. So if you think about it, I know when I was living upstate and I had a number of large properties, the last thing I wanted to do, was go to somebody else's property for dinner. Because I was working my ass off, flying all over the world. I wanted to enjoy my own property. You want to come over here for dinner, you could stay overnight, you could stay a week, whatever you want. I'm not leaving. Similarly, and I've never had a plane, and I don't think I want to own a plane, but if I were somebody who had a large jet, the last thing I would want to do would be to go on some other billionaire's jet down to St. Thomas. I would want to trust my crew, if I were a billionaire, if I were Gates. I would want my security people to check my plane going into a place like St. Thomas, which is, this changeable weather conditions, corruptible people down in the, the service area. Who knows what they're going to do to my plane? I don't want to be on somebody else's plane at the beck and call of the captain of that other plane in international airspace. I don't want to do that. So the fact that there are a large number of billionaires who were doing this with Epstein suggests to me that they saw a carrot an opportunity that they were going to pursue here. Maybe they didn't want their wives to know that their plane was going to St. Thomas. Maybe they didn't want people asking too many questions about what they were doing in Africa or wherever they were with Epstein. And when I see it's a telltale sign. You see multiple billionaires signing up for the Epstein travel program, like that. What's that annoying ad on television for the
Perillo Cruises.
Exactly.
I think that's
Epstein's
only
tours.
in New York. I think
Yeah, I mean,
that's like up there with the Carvel ice cream. Like, who told this guy he should be his own spokesperson?
right. Would you put your dentures in, please? I mean, Jesus. But so you look at this and you say, I always try to take a step back from a problem when I'm thinking about it and say, all right, let's think about this, okay? This is a long-running game where a supposed billionaire who can't explain how he made his money, who can't explain his resume, as well as so many gaping holes in his resume, is created a carnival crew here that's going to go down to some island and talk smack in these funny sculptures and settings with all these crazy people and sell all these different schemes, and somehow Bill Gates decides to go to this island. Now, Bill Gates, I've never talked to him. I ran into him in a green room. And, he has a reputation for being very smart.
I bet he smells like mothballs.
I didn't, well, that wasn't the highest priority, Jason. He was, I needed to use this internet connection, and he was in my way. I'm like, dude, I'm going on TV here.
He's blocking the road ahead.
I saw him sideways, and there's not a lot of pictures of him sideways, and he doesn't look the same sideways. So I thought it was just somebody, in the green room. And the protocol always, in that particular one, was they would have me on this particular show to discuss news that had broken in the last hour. So I had to, I'd get up to the place and I had to check anyway. But, the fact that he made a decision, he's married, he's got kids, you're a billionaire, and you've made a decision to spend time in Africa with Epstein, time down in, in Epstein's Island, time in New York. It doesn't make sense to me that would be a high priority for Bill Gates for noble purposes. And then when you get to the business meeting, in St. Thomas, and you notice that, you can't take the group legitimately that's at Epstein's house out to a restaurant where they serve alcohol, because the average age of the women is 15 and a half. You should say to yourself, maybe you're a father with kids. This doesn't seem right. And it's not like Epstein was married with kids, with a long...
And these are the friends hanging out or something?
Yeah, that's not what it was. And to me, it stinks. And it stinks of being an obvious setup. It was a way to entrap lots of people, and it's a tactic, and a strategy, but it's a tactic that has been employed over centuries, maybe millennia, with different tools way back when. But it's a tactic that, if you really are careful, and you want to take your wealth and increase it, and you want to live a good life, set some good examples, you don't do this kind of stuff.
I don't know if I sent this to you, but there was an interview with a guy who had some IT company in St. Thomas that was doing computer stuff for Epstein.
He did.
Who said that he's like, it got to a point where he was like, I can't ignore this, and he had to quit working for Epstein, and now he's speaking out, saying that he saw inappropriately young girls, inappropriately dressed or undressed, running around all the time, to the extent that he was like, what the hell is going on?
But he still took Epstein's money for like 4 years or something.
Maybe. But I mean,
After that...
maybe he was thinking, is this the guy's kids or what? And who knows how long it took him to figure out. But at least he's coming forward, using his name, telling what he knows. Who knows how long it took him to figure out.
So why don't we jump into our standard disclaimer side, and for those who are new, and Jason, I gather you're building traffic again?
Yeah, despite YouTube's best efforts, there has been an increase of about 1,000 new subscribers in the past 28 days.
That's very good.
Yeah.
That's a numbers comment, by the way.
Yeah, hey.
You just made a numbers comment.
Well, because YouTube now forces me to look at the creator beta page, which has more analytics in it, so I saw that yesterday.
All right. Good, maybe, well, that's great. So this is a show for the newcomers where we're trying to do what I think we're succeeding in doing, and that is to engage you, the viewership, in the process of using your own eyes to follow the leads, follow the clues that we set out for you each week, and satisfy yourselves that what we're telling you is indeed the truth about these topics that are really gripping, frankly. We're in a moment here where the so-called, I love this word, cognoscenti.
What is that?
Those are the people who believe they know what everything is, the in crowd, they know everything. Have in fact, who is that guy, Gruber from MIT? Remember the guy who said Americans are too stupid to understand that Obamacare.
Obamacare,
you know.
right.
But the cognoscenti, the Grubers of this world, have sold everyone who works, and most people who also invest, a false bill of goods that this idea of unregulated globalism makes any sense whatsoever. It makes sense for the chosen few, who can get out ahead of the trade. They can discover when interest rates are going to plummet or interest rates are going to rise or this is going to happen. When you get the inside scoop, you can make a lot of money. Of course, you don't declare any.
It's like knowing which horse is going to win the race.
Right, exactly.
Easy.
And that's not a system. When you take a step back and you say there's 7.5 billion of us on the planet, that's not a system that actually works for the overwhelming majority of people on the planet. And certainly in the richest country on earth, it doesn't make sense. That system has been foisted on us for 32 years now. That's an entire. If you study your own family, an average generation is more like 28 years, 30 years, going way back into time over, say, 10 generations. This is an entire generation that has been sold a bill of goods, and we're now waking up to just how fatally flawed the system is, and we're learning that the thought leaders, the people who are selling us on this unregulated globalism, are corrupt as hell.
Yeah.
Witness the number of them involved with Epstein, and we don't even know how many other Epstein-like circles of hell there are in various countries, in the big countries in the
Well,
world.
Nexium was just taken out. That seems to be connected.
And we don't know the truth yet about Pizzagate and other things like that. I mean, there are a lot, and the thing about Boys Town, and
Right.
that's just the United States. You've got the stuff in Canada, in the UK, and around the world. So to learn, that the cognoscenti should be more known as the bonehead ascenti. They did not know what the hell they were talking about, and that they were covering up all these problems by bribing and threatening and conspiring and inducing people who can pull levers of power to pull the wrong lever, and to not go after an Epstein, not go after a Wexner, not go after a Dershowitz, not go after a Clinton, and let this whole corrupt game continue, is going to become a major league eye-opener. I mean, it's already been an eye-opener for me and people I'm close to on this project, trying to get into the details. Every once in a while I get a call from one of them saying, "My God, I had no idea it was this bad."
Yeah.
And these are people who've been with us now for years studying it. So this is not me and this is not Jason and myself telling you the truth. This is about us trying to encourage you to discover the truth for yourselves. And then if you agree that this needs to be reformed, that we need to do something about it, what we're really hoping you'll do is reach out and encourage other people to subscribe to this channel, generally not just to watch this show, to watch as many of Jason's shows as you're interested in, but to follow the avenues that we lay out for you, follow the facts to the evidence, understand how far away this is from being compliant with law, and then ask there isn't a government on the planet right now that's flush with cash, a serious government. They're all in debt. They're all for different problems across the Middle East, which used to be so cash rich. Of course, the price of oil and gas is on the floor. So those countries that have made big commitments don't have the revenue streams coming in. The European experiment is disgusting and blowing up. I mean, if I could short catering firms in Brussels, that's what I'd be doing, because that place is gone.
Short cater?
Catering firms. The thing that, with the advent of the EU, European Union, the businesses that have done well are the firms that put on the banquets and the fancy hotels and the limousines and the hookers. They're making a lot of money off this program. But the second this globalism is exposed for what it truly is, then there's no need for a Brussels or these regional capitals. There's no need for regional development banks and all this other kind of stuff that makes no sense, particularly those that are situated in Geneva, in New York City, in high-cost areas. All this stuff's going to come, I think, crashing down, which is a good thing. But in this environment, it's not like any particular government is sitting there and saying, oh yeah, we have a surplus each year of $5 trillion a year so that we could easily afford, a $93 trillion Green New Deal. There is no such government on this planet. Now, maybe on some alternative universe, maybe when Bezos lands on Mars, we're going to discover, I don't know, quadrillions of piles of gold and platinum and diamonds. Actually, if that happened, that would depress the price of gold and platinum and diamonds, the whole supply and demand thing. But
Charles, there was a report that there's apparently a colony on Mars of children.
Yeah,
I've heard that. I haven't been able to verify it, but it's floating around in the ether somewhere.
Well, we'll sick AOC's research team on that one. Maybe they've been successful because they're using her Green New Deal. But anyway, so what we try to do here is give you, we weave a tale together, give you a working theory, but then we give you the facts, or give you the links so you can check the facts. And we rely, we're not going to go out and do independent audit of the Clinton Foundation, which is impossible to do from the outside. But we do look very carefully at any evidence that we can find, and we give you a chance to see and test our conclusions. In every one of these shows, and I guess this is 173 shows, which, the numbers guy, that's a small number. But when you think that the average length of these shows is 2 hours, that's a lot of programming.
Yeah.
I'm told. I mean, I think, Jason, you would.
Seems like a lot. I wonder if people can raise their hands if they've watched every single show.
Should give them a special decal or a insignia.
Oh, Charles, you did remind me. I got an email this morning from Redbubble.com, which is a website that I utilize for the various merchandise that people can purchase, and there is a 30% off offer today. So people buying Crowdsource the Truth merchandise from Redbubble.com can receive 30% off. All you got to do is go to Redbubble.com and search for Crowdsource the Truth. The code to use is FORYOU, FORYOU 30. And until midnight tonight, people are going to get 30% off t-shirts. There's a lot of Sunday with Charles material on here that people can choose from. So it's a good time to purchase some Crowdsource the Truth mugs and t-shirts.
Back to school wear.
Back to school wear. People can wear it to school.
So if people have comments, and I now get comments on a regular basis, and I appreciate them. Constructive criticism, I appreciate. And if you want to do that, you can reach me through my site. You can follow me on Twitter, and tweet to me or send me a direct message. And I keep them short because Jason and I are very, very busy, and I'm not going to be able to read a 20-page memo or something like that on the subject that's not entirely clear what is all about at the very beginning. But I do make an effort to try to respond to emails and to direct messages, and to a lesser extent to tweets. It might be worthwhile putting the playlist up, Jason, which you said.
Yes, of course, the playlist. So people who maybe haven't seen every episode, Charles, they might want to go over to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, and if you aren't subscribed, please do. And you can click on the Sunday with Charles playlist. You're going to get every one of the now 173 episodes of both Sunday with Charles and Charles Ortel is Closing In. So it's a good resource. I've said many times, Charles, I feel like anybody could take any one of these presentations and essentially transcribe them and submit the text in a criminal suit, and you'd have suitable evidence to basically put lots of people in jail. For people who are interested in following along with the presentation, the best way to do that, on almost every video, in the video description, you're going to have links to sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by Patreon, Subscribestar, and also paypal.me/Crowdsource the Truth. But you also have this link that says download Charles's presentation. If you click on that, it's going to give you the PDF that Charles and I use to present the show each week, and you can save that, print it out, decorate your house with them, do whatever you might choose to do.
And as it gets cold, you can use it to start a wood fire.
That's right.
In a fireplace.
In a fireplace or wherever it might be convenient.
But on a serious note, we do try to do each presentation in a similar format. So now what we like to do is just bring you up to date on some of the stories we're watching, which we think are most relevant and are going to accelerate into a tsunami of a news season, which is going to hit, I think, if it doesn't hit before Labor Day, it's going to hit immediately after Labor Day. This, of course, coming up is normally a quiet week where people are either back home from summer vacation trying to get kids into college or high school or whatever, or getting ready to do that before Labor Day. Nonetheless, both Judicial Watch and Larry Klayman and others have made, this has been a busy summer. There's been a lot of progress, and if we hit that first link, it's worthwhile noting, this is the first story last week on the idea that Judicial Watch was going to demand this Royce Lamberth judge, I think, to come forward with more information about Hillary Clinton's email investigation. Well, the hearing occurred, and the judge so ordered. Said, "Damn it!" You know, we after Thursday, the judge said, "Baloney! You know, we want to see this information forthwith." And this is standard. You know, Clinton. They had they use David Kendall and Williams and Connolly for much of their stuff. Williams and Connolly is a very powerful firm in Washington, D.C. Apparently it pays its lawyers the highest of, lawyers are paid there and in many places in the United States, so everyone wants to work there.
Lanny Davis or Lanny Brewer? Which one is Williams and Connolly? There's all these Lannys running around.
Yeah, but I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, yeah, right. This is the address, I think.
Yeah.
So many court buildings have that address around the country, Charles. 333, whatever. It's crazy.
Right. So anyway, Judicial Watch has been making progress here, pushing on this, but it's worthwhile noting when the Clintons want to stall, when the swamp wants to stall, they've managed to put off a serious inquiry into why the hell Hillary Clinton conducted all of her government business and her monkey business on unsecured toilet bowl servers beginning February 1st, or thereabouts. No, it was January 21st, 2009. How in the hell did she get away with doing that for now 11 years, 11 plus years? And the justice system is saying, well, they got to give her deference. So she was the first lady and the senator, and so we can't. I mean, the fact that she could be worse than Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, we can't examine that. I mean, what if we found some really incriminating evidence? Then we'd have to do something about it. I mean, the amount of deference this person has gotten, and her husband and Chelsea, really sends a horrible message. I mean, it's not as if this person, single-handedly affected the course of the Cold War, or eradicated slavery on the planet, or found a cure for cancer.
Causing slavery.
Exactly. I mean, this person is a straight-up thug crook.
Well, Charles, I think she addressed it in your visit to the Chappaqua Data Center. She basically just said, I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, nice defense. We're all dead anyway. I'm just going to stall until you can't get me.
Right, exactly.
So Judicial Watch has been making progress. Larry Klayman has been making progress. And John Solomon, I think, has a story that really got my blood boiling in the last several days. That here's another story, another failure. And we, I think, have documented some of this. John and maybe a bit behind us on the FBI vault, where I think there's a lot of good information in the Hillary R. Clinton dumps, that multiple times the FBI just basically didn't examine stuff they should have examined with the thoroughness that they took to examining Manafort and Corinne Brown and Steve Stockman and many other people who got the book thrown at them. And so this is yet another story where apparently only by digging, by Chuck Grassley and others digging, do they discover that yet again it's Peter Strzok made a set of bad decisions that magically, it just happens by chance, let the Clintons off the hook. Or they didn't go into evidence the way they're supposed to do it. I mean, I'm told by people who know the FBI. I actually know one person who's a senior line agent at the FBI who handled retired, but he handled, met him years ago, he handled the Tanzania and the Kenya bombings. He was the point person on both of those.
Not Mozambique.
Not Mozambique, no.
Charles, I hate to interject, but we've got a very pertinent question here.
Sure.
Leanne is asking, is George Soros involved in any of this Epstein stuff?
I don't know that he's definitely. I don't think that Epstein would have been able to bullshit Soros. Soros is a numbers guy and a shrewd financier. I don't like the man, but and Soros has
He's a foot faulter, that's known.
Foot faults at a game, at tennis. I mean, why would you do that in like an amateur? And he was doing this in his late 70s, early 80s. I mean, why would you do that?
Because cheaters cheat.
That's cheaters got to cheat.
So this FBI guy, he's not able to tell us if Soros is involved?
I would guess that Soros is not directly involved with Epstein, but is Soros involved in in convening fun meetings around the world to have commitments to engage in lascivious activity? No doubt of that.
It does seem probably like Mossad would be opposed to George Soros, because even though he is Jewish by birth, he has admitted in that 60 Minutes interview that he worked with Nazis to expose Jews. So it seems like the type of guy that the Mossad might not let into their operation.
I don't know anything particularly about the Mossad, although I have met people from the Mossad. But I think my guess that those type of people at the highest levels, to say that they personally may be moral, but they see the failings of human failings, evil human failings around the world, and they reach a conclusion as a guess that, yeah, you don't want to do business with Hitler, but if Hitler walks in the door and says, I'll give you Stalin's head, you say, well, okay. One down, one to go. Maybe we'll get Hitler later.
Exactly.
I mean, I can imagine that at the highest levels of skullduggery, people might think like that. But one marker I want to lay down here. I'm patient, and I realize that what I want to do is not the world's priority. But and Donald Trump has big things on his plate to deal with, and we'll talk about how he's doing a good job on some of them. But if Barr and Trump do not have concrete, deliverable proof that they are draining the swamp well before the November election, he's not going to win. Trump is not going to win. I mean, people are not going to sit and say, well, it was a big problem in the swamp. It was bigger and dirtier than I thought, and so you just need to give me another 4 years to try to drain the swamp. Ixnay on that. That's not going to happen. Yeah. They've had enough time. They've had, really dread resistance. This thing is being set up, I think, actually pretty well. Trump is a master at understanding the psychology of large crowds. He's comfortable being a celebrity. He's comfortable in the spotlight. I think he understood well that August of 2019 was not a great moment to really break this open. Where, on the other hand, when we have Weinstein's trial beginning around September 10th or thereabouts, and that's supposed to last for 6 weeks. So for 6 weeks, we're going to have Weinstein's lawyers, getting up there and trying to defend him. And you're innocent until proven guilty, but it's not going to end up well, I don't think, for Weinstein and for Hollywood, and for the perception of yet another very significant donor to the Clintons, politically, and to the Clinton Foundation. Yeah, Weinstein, through all his celebrity friends, was very able to, with the influence that he had, a considerable influence when he was in his quote prime, to have fundraisers. You need money for this politician. Get all these agents and all these people, make them write the checks.
Actors. A lot of people owed a lot of Hollywood, favors to Harvey Weinstein.
Right, exactly. So that's going to start happening, unless things change mid-September. The interest is only going to grow, in my opinion, into the Epstein thing. I believe that a lot of progress is occurring, I hope and trust, on the Clinton Foundation in many countries and states around the world. We have the gathering problems that people are trying to evaluate in the markets. Is there going to be a crash? Is there not going to be a crash? All those type of issues. So when we get back from our summer vacation, that's when you want to put fuel on this fire. if we have a crash, people are going to say, well, it's all Trump's fault. I don't think so. I think, this teetering, this unregulated globalism was a project that began when Trump was just building buildings. Back in 80, 85, 86, 87, 88 is when it took hold. And, if we do have a correction, which some would argue, I would argue is long overdue, you can't just say it's Trump's fault. I mean, it's Congress's fault, it's the regulators' fault, it's the public's fault. There are a lot of things that went wrong with this thing. And anyway, in this environment, I think we're going to be looking for people to blame. We're not going to be willing in this, let's just say volatile environment leading up to election, just say, everything's fine. Let bygones be bygones. Who cares about the political? That's not going to happen. So I know you have views on Patrick Byrne. We're going to end the show talking about giving people my latest views on GE, because it was very much in the news on the last week. After I exposed GE, a young person came to me with a 200-page file on Overstock, thinking it was perhaps a fraud, and I didn't look at it, frankly. I was just too busy on GE and other things. I don't have a view on Overstock, the company. I'm told by people who have followed it that people were trying to go after Byrne, that there's more good than bad in Byrne. I don't have a view yet on it. But what I bring up for people is to say that his side of this story is that he was encouraged by the FBI, by senior people and multiple people in the FBI, to engage in a romantic relationship with this Russian, last name Butina, who had set up, with questionable antecedents, some would say, the equivalent of an NRA equivalent association in Russia. He was encouraged to strike up a romantic relationship with this person, and he has suggested or stated that he was offered compensation approaching $1 billion by the FBI.
Wow, I didn't hear that part.
Yeah,
where does the FBI get $1 billion
exactly?
from?
And that's the first.
That doesn't seem plausible.
Well, it does seem plausible to me.
How does the FBI have $1 billion?
Well, if you go very easily, if you go back to the opening slide and the picture, the Epstein's Islands, if the real game here since 1948 or whatever, or beforehand, has been that the job, in connection with the job of finding criminals and putting them away, Meyer Lansky, people like that, you're going to pay your top guys in the FBI back then maybe $30,000, and Meyer Lansky is making millions of dollars. Chances are Lansky is going to be able to bribe, one or more people in the FBI, people around the FBI. Well, it's not a fair fight. You pay your G-men that little amount of money, and you're going after tremendous amounts of money. It's not going to work for you in the end. A lot of stuff's going to go missing. And what happens if along the way, people in the FBI and the security services say, you know what, these guys on Wall Street and Hollywood and industrialists, they don't do the hard. We're strapping guns on every morning. We deserve our piece of the pie, and this pie is gigantic, And what if these security agencies have become corrupted? What do you do? I mean, it's not easy to invest $100 billion. So you give somebody $100 billion and say, all right, come up with a smart place to put that for the next 10 years that won't attract any attention. That's not an easy job. What if the real number you're asked to invest is $10 trillion? Which, those cases of the cocaine people, the Colombian cocaine people who had so many $100 bills in attics in their mansions in Colombia.
It becomes a problem just having them.
Well, rats started eating it.
Oh my God.
In Miami, you got rid of those Bad Boys 2, that shit movie. But anyway, a $1 billion bribe actually makes a lot more sense to me, particularly to somebody like Byrne than.
But he's already a billionaire. Why are they giving him $1 billion?
Again, I was just watching, I don't know if you've ever watched these movies, but I watch them repeatedly. There's Tom Cruise's Jack Reacher movies.
Oh, yeah.
And there's two that I know of I watched both of them yesterday, actually, and again.
It's hard to tell them apart from Mission Impossible. It's just Tom Cruise beating guys
I
up
know,
and
but it's
doing
fun.
parkour.
It's very relaxing to watch it, especially when you know the ending. But they asked that question of the villain in the first Jack Reacher thing. You're already rich. Don't you have enough money? And he comes back, and I forget who he is. A great actor, I thought. And he says, "In this business, there is no such thing as enough." You always want more. And there are people who do think that way.
So if you're working for the FBI, even if you're making 200 grand a year, and they say, here, go bribe this billionaire guy 900 million, wouldn't you be like,
where's my taste? And the point is, well, okay, so how did Comey go from being, an average Joe to being general counsel of Lockheed, and then, whatever he was at a hedge fund, and how does he have all this money all of a sudden?
and people say Christopher Wray is worth 35 million, and the explanation is he's a partner at a law firm. I've known people who've been partners at law firms, but $35 million net worth still seems like a lot for a lawyer.
Well, in some law firms, it's low, actually. You can make a lot of money in these big law firms, depending on how it works. But the point is, when you look at, if you say the game is washing dirty money, and you say that you're going to put the worst people away, that's the FBI's mission, to maintain the integrity of the U.S. financial markets in league with the SEC and put away bad guys and protect the national security. You got to know your enemies. If you say, if a fraudster comes to you and says, I'm one of the best fraudsters in the world, and last year I made $600,000, you say, I don't think so. I actually don't think that's probably true.
Can I introduce you to a tiger?
Right, exactly, exactly. It's got to be, the top fraudsters are probably making minimally $1 billion a month. Minimally.
What?
Personally.
Whoa.
Minimally. Because they have all the money they've already gotten in their life. They're 65 years old or whatever. They've got a pile of money, earning money, and then they're making new money, stealing money. I mean, they got to have tons of money.
Jeez.
So, and for a lot of these people, some look at multinational companies like GE and say they're fraudsters. And they look at, the regulatory process as being totally gamed.
So they have to do this in order to have an even playing field or something like that?
Right, and when you get caught, you pay a modest $50 million fine, as we'll get to in a few minutes. But, and meanwhile, you've illegally lifted the value of your stock by $60 billion. You pay...
GE below 8, Charles.
So, as I say later in the presentation, it's a woman's shoe size now.
It's kind of a big woman, but okay.
Yeah. So Burns' allegations do need to be investigated. I hope they are. But the idea of sending dopey James Comey out to mock Byrne, which happened, we hit this fourth link here.
The thing I found strange about what Patrick Byrne was saying, because most of it rang true to me, he seems a little nervous in his presentation, but really the big deal was he was so adamant that Hillary Clinton was also spied on. That's the first we've really heard that.
Well, see, that, that actually makes a lot of sense to me, because if you look at this and you say, a villain in all this, in my opinion, is John Brennan. Mm-hmm. And John Brennan only went in, I think, to his CIA role in the second Obama term. I don't think he was in the first term. His background needs to be scrubbed in the same way that Manafort was scrubbed. Brennan's background, going right back to the very beginning, needs to be scrubbed. How does a former member of the Communist Party get involved in the CIA, chasing Al-Qaeda, and convert to Islam?
Wahhabi Islam.
Wahhabi Islam, and then get picked to be the head of the CIA after an interlude where his firm is caught stealing information about Obama and I think McCain, from government sources and altering records. I mean, that doesn't sound like a prime candidate to be head of the CIA that I would like to finance. But anyway, Comey here is pushing back on saying the FBI doesn't work that way. Well, how the hell would Comey know how the FBI works?
The FBI doesn't work at all, from what I can see, Charles. They're sitting around boozing and raping the employees, according to TruePundit.com.
Yeah, I mean, there's something badly wrong here. And this is, absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you anoint these FBI people and you scare the public into believing that these are all-knowing, wonderful people, and you don't make sure that the bad apples are weeded out, but instead promote the bad apples to lead the agencies, that's you talk about threats to the American Republic. That's a much bigger threat than whether Vladimir Putin's goons decided to buy Facebook ads to sway the 16 people who watch them that Donald Trump was a better candidate than somebody who wouldn't even show up to campaign. I mean, it's a lot more serious to corrupt the FBI, maybe corrupt our security services,
Yeah.
that's serious stuff. And there must be, that's the Drain the Swamp project.
Yeah, and I don't know, Charles. I think our podcasting numbers are crushing Putin's. So his Facebook campaign isn't going to do anything. You know, I had on Thursday guest host on Kevin Shipp's intelligence assessment, which is normally only on Patreon. We had Diana West, and she's spoken extensively about how both Comey and Brennan are self-admitted communists. So I wonder, it's interesting if we look and see who turned their back on communism first, Putin, Brennan, or Comey.
That's right. Yeah. Putin's like, I know this stuff doesn't work. I'm a capitalist now.
Right.
I love it. You know, here you got Comey and Brennan, Clinton's probably. You know, I'll go back and just remind you that one of the times many years ago, when after the wall fell, my ex-wife then would take to listening to NPR, and even worse, WBAI, and they had this show on the weekend where these professors from, I think it was CCNY, had invited communists, former communists, and it was a symposium about, the Americans were saying the Soviet Union it didn't work because they misapplied communism. Communism works very well. It's just that the Soviets didn't get it right. And these Russians are saying, no. and I had a deal with my ex-wife that I would not listen to Howard Stern, and she was not supposed to listen.
Oh, you mean you wanted to and she didn't like it?
Yeah, and she was not supposed to in our weekend house listen to NPR. And there's my little child there in a high chair and looks at me, first sentence, turn that shit off. That's his first sentence.
Wow.
That incident. But anyway, there's this, I don't know if Sundance is a man or a woman or a collection of people, but the conservative treehouse is something I watch every day, and it actually does very quick and useful analysis. And here they're saying that it's noteworthy that what McCabe and Comey are doing is trying to attack,
They're
superficial.
lawyering this.
Well, superficial elements, but they're not denying the substance of the fact that the FBI encouraged the CEO of a public company to engage in a romantic relationship with a Russian, for reasons that don't make all that much sense. And on the question of Hillary being in the mix of people who were spied on, that makes perfect sense to me. If you're Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, right? You don't like Trump because you know what Trump's going to do is just pulverize the Obama legacy into oblivion. You don't like that part of it. But on the other hand, you're now rich and you like the fact that the economy is going to move along, and you actually may like the fact that Trump's going to go after the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation, whatever, and there isn't much yet to go after in the Obama Foundation. But so it would make perfect sense to me actually that the Obama team would want to make sure they had a lot of dirt on Hillary. But they know what the Clintons, we all know what the Clintons were like when Bill was president. When Bill was president, they were bankrupt financially. Technically, they had debts far exceeding their assets. And look what they did then. Imagine what Hillary might have done with a foundation, Clinton Foundation cesspool that would still be running. That there'd be no inspector generals. She'd be appointing this and packing the Supreme Court. So Obama's had to know life, could get very rough for them if the Clintons decided, that they were going to make an example of the Obamas or blame something that connected to Hillary Clinton, the State Department. Say, well, Barack Obama knew all about it. So it's totally logical to me that, the Team Obama would want dirt. They want to spy on anybody who could conceivably be. And this is a team. I mean, look what Cheryl Atkinson has said about the degree to which the CIA and others spied on the Supreme Court, on the Senate, on her, aggressively so. So they know Team Obama, having done this, and appreciating that technology gets even more powerful, would certainly understand that it's a risk, a significant risk that Hillary might have been president.
The one thing I'll say, Charles, as far as the FBI's successful track record on this Patrick Byrne investigation, they've located one woman who Peter Strzok did not have sex with. So that's a good. Check that off for the FBI. They're doing something over there.
That's right. Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm no fashion maven, but I think Patrick Byrne should show up for an interview not wearing a T-shirt from a Fruit of the Loom ad.
I want to like Patrick Byrne. I want to understand his story.
So just quickly on GE, my call on GE way back when was a structural call. And when people talk about shorting, when you're betting the stock prices want to go down, there's so many countermeasures against the short community. Human nature is to believe that trees grow forever.
Why are they showing Bernie Madoff?
Well, because it's the same in GE. So what GE did here, back in the 1980s and before, when a company went to buy its stock back at a premium to book value, so I'm getting a little technical here, but if the book value of GE stock is, let's say, for argument's sake, $10, and it's trading in the public market at $60, the book value is just the accounting value, and the market can drive the price up way above book value if there are more buyers than sellers of a stock, if there's more hype or whatever. It used to be that if a company wanted to buy its stock back at above book value, it would have to get an opinion from a non-conflicted third party that was fair to the remaining shareholders of the company. That you saddle the company, you're going to shrink its equity down by buying it at 6 times, in this case, in this example, 6 times the book value per share. So you're going to dramatically shrink the equity, and the debt, if any, especially if you use debt to do this, is going to soar. So you're actually looking at the books of the company, you're creating potential distress for the company if its stock price is supported illicitly or by quirks or on the basis of false information. It's a very risky thing to do. This is an article that goes back into the fact that GE, and I had pointed this out back in 2007, that GE was regularly engaged in a process of borrowing money to buy back its stock at prices that made no sense whatsoever. And if you go back and you look at the average price that GE has paid over time, I would say since 2001 to the present, to buy its stock back, it's way above the current trading value of $7.89. And the reason for this is not, like, oh, somebody made one bad decision. The reason is that Jack Welch and others going way back decided, they as industrialists would be smarter than all of Wall Street. And they would go, and all the speculative crowd, they were that smart. They were going to take everybody else on, even though their people were not paid as well, their people didn't have the same experience, their people, were marching to the beat of a different drummer, their people were seeing deals last. They weren't seeing the best deals. They were seeing, I've regularly had, when I was on Wall Street, people would say, well, that's a pretty stupid deal. Why don't you see if you can get GE to do it?
But I thought Jack Welch is such a respected guy who's writing books and...
See, that's part of this whole, get back. I'm not saying that Jack Welch has been on Epstein Island. On the other hand, he did his exit interview while he was CEO of GE was to the editor of Harvard Business Review, and they had a tour d'affaires. She was the one in charge of writing the article, assessing, and she became his wife, Susie Welch.
Who could resist this guy? I mean, look at him.
That's
Brad
right.
Pitt has got nothing on him. Is he still alive?
I think so.
I mean, in this photo.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jack Welch.
That's all right. But anyway, no, I mean, this is a guy back when he was CEO of General Electric, they owned NBC. They
Right.
owned, which is important, not just it's more important, I was told by a powerful movie guy, that it's far more important, NBC Universal and the distribution, than NBC, the television station, or whatever.
Right.
So if you want to get your movies distributed,
Yeah.
you don't piss off Jack Welch.
Right.
You don't piss off, and if you want to stay in politics, GE's spending tremendous amounts of money on lobbying, political contributions. At its prime, at the high point, GE was $60 a share, and that was back in May of 2000.
But it's also interesting to note, and certainly not a coincidence, that all of these rich, crooked, crazy guys are owning huge media conglomerates like Robert Maxwell owned the Mirror in England, and Ghislaine Maxwell's father, right? So this connection of the media to corruption and to the government and people who want to generate this false reality, this artificial reality to control what people think. It's undeniable.
Well, so what I was told, and I won't say by which media operation, but I noticed, that there was this large media operation springing out of nowhere, and I said, well, how do they get approval? I mean, how do they get people to want to go all over the world and do all this? And the American guy who was working for this firm, he said, you don't get it. I mean, these people aren't journalists. These are spies.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, there is an overlap between every journalist and spies. Spies use journalists, and journalists use spies, and in theory, we have a media that's supposed to uncover corruption. In practice, they fail to do it, and that's why
they're involved in it.
They're leading it, and that's why, what you're doing makes so much sense.
I meant to pull that clip. I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. Throwing people down the stairs like a tough guy. There weren't even any stairs there. It's a weak threat.
So in the case of Iran, I've been on now Press TV, which is, I think, a private operation in Iran, debating. I'm the person they like to whoop up on. But here's somebody writing about the fact Iran has decided to put sanctions on Ted Cruz, John Bolton, and Larry Kudlow. It's like nobody cares.
Yeah,
it's not like Ted
cares.
Cruz is going to Iran anytime soon.
Well, he's not allowed to buy Iranian coffee.
That's right. Exactly. Can't watch Iranian movies.
No more Korans for these guys.
Yeah, not the Shiite.
What are these sanctions? How could they sanction those guys?
They can't really. I mean, it's just, but it's, and apparently, I didn't put it in here, but the foreign minister of Iran just crashed the G7 meeting. He just showed
up?
Yeah.
That doesn't even work at the Sundance Film Festival. How the hell did he get in?
Because probably Europeans are scared. The Germans and the French are terrified about what the Iranians know about how the Iranian deal got put together.
Wow.
And how many bribes were paid to Germans and French and other people. So I don't doubt it was a setup.
They should take a look at what happened to Gaddafi if they're afraid of bribes.
So we have this story that we're going to spend the last 4 lines here on China, and they, like the Iranians, are trying to make the big globalist case that they're going to have the last laugh, and it's the so-called thin case. And we're going to show you in a second just how weak China's cards are at this moment in time, and it's actually, I think, a good thing that Trump has provoked this, so that we get to see the way a very weak country, though it's large in numbers of people, it's financially vulnerable, it's fragile, it's ruled by a dictatorship. And it's one thing to have a dictatorship of 1,000 people, but if you have a dictatorship of 1.3, 1.4 billion, if that's how many people they have, that's tough to keep going. At a certain point in time, people say, you know what, I'm tired. You put the dick in dictator, you're out of here.
Exactly. So Charles, do you think, it's difficult, for me at least, you turn on the TV and Trump is talking tough on China, dopes in the press pool or, saying crap to Trump. Hard to know. Is Trump being brilliant in what he's doing with this trade war?
Yes, he is. And I'll tell you why. Because we see now what the Chinese are prepared to do, right? We'll see what the reaction is here in Hong Kong. I'll show you on the next slide just how weak the economy is. Do we really want to set the world down a path where China puts in, 5G with Huawei equipment, and we have social credit, and suddenly, the Chinese decide that Jason Goodman can't have a card, he can't have a YouTube, he can't have this, he can't have that, even though, wait a minute, the average Chinese family is, spending, $2,000 a year or something. It has not yet blossomed into being what it could have been. And I think the answer to your question on why do so many in the media and the multinational world put up with this, they were sold the same false bill of Gruber goods that, we gotta let, China's the future, India's the future. There's so many people there. Of course the market eventually will be big. We ought to give up what we have now for what they'll have in 10,000 years. It just doesn't make any sense. But
10,000 years.
Well, if the Chinese continue the path that they're on, there may well end up being many more countries inside China than just the one China that you see.
Huh.
There are different ethnic groupings, there are different historical relationships. China could fragment and fall apart. It's very.
Hong Kong looks like they're ready for a revolution.
I think they're in a revolution.
Huh.
Yeah. So we have this piece in Zero Hedge, which they say that globalism just transferred the U.S. economy to China, and I think they mean PCR. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but it's not just China. It's really to China and India predominantly. That these geniuses in Washington D.C. and the college campuses, they loved globalism. They got more honoraria. They got, their endowments went up. Everything was hunky. They had more students applying for the same number of places. They loved it. But the truth is that when you encourage companies that could make everything in the United States and ship around the world, to instead of having complexes scattered around the United States where they buy parts from American manufacturers who in turn employ American people, and their own workers have the salaries. Most people don't save, so the money that you pay the workers just goes right back into the economy. The multiplier effect. Instead of doing that, these egghead geniuses, in quotes, the bonehead Ashantis, they said, no. What we'll do is we'll eviscerate these great cities across the country. We'll encourage manufacturing to move to the places where no one's going to check the environmental pollution, no one's going to check the abuse of the worker, the way workers are abused in China, far more aggressively so today than the capitalists in the 19th century did in the United States of America. And what I said earlier on that Trump won the election in the last 24 hours by the announcement, which is not final, that we may have a new trade deal with Japan. And the suggestion...
The last 24 hours, you mean yesterday?
Just recently, just the
wow.
last minutes.
Wow.
They've announced that they may be close to having a trade deal with Japan. They may be working to one with the UK. They've already got one with Canada and Mexico. Suddenly, you can sit here as the United States and say, we alone are already the biggest market in the world. We don't really need our companies to sell around the world to do well. You've got a vast untapped market here in the U.S. It's getting richer and richer. Focus here. Don't pay for the expensive plane fares, business class around the world for all your executives and missionary work and stuff like that. Just focus in the U.S. and bring the manufacturing back here. But the second piece, which I think we're going to see in coming days from this political neophyte who doesn't know anything, who's such an idiot, I'm being sarcastic. No, that would definitely be Scaramucci. I'm being sarcastic about Trump. He's going to pivot here, and he's going to come before the American people and say, listen, I'm standing up for you because in this country, you don't think I'm an environmentalist, but we have been enforcing America's strict environmentalist laws. We have been enforcing America's laws that protect workers. They don't do that in China. Multinational American companies went to China to get around, to skirt our environmental laws, our worker protection laws. You Americans, yes, in theory, you're the benefit. You want a cheap plastic piece of gobbledygook for your kid. It's going to be cheaper than if we made it in the United States. If you want a television set, it's going to be cheaper for now than if we made it in the United States. But we're changing all that. We're not going to let the Chinese despoil the planet the way they are putting up more and more coal-fired power plants. Well, he's going to be able to spin this whole...
Mining operations that use dangerous chemicals. But Charles, I understood that China had very good worker protection. They put nets right outside the windows.
That's right.
So they jump, they catch them.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Not funny. No, they do have those nets.
So, if we, let's go to this second to last one here. The high and mighty people, I love the names of some of these people. Peter Stubley, is reacting and questioning whether Donald Trump has the right to, order U.S. companies to leave China and to be so hard on my friend from long ago, Jay Powell. And the answer is, Donald Trump, nobody elected Donald Trump to be, the nicest American on the planet. That's not what we need.
He would have lost that election.
that we know. Hillary certainly would have lost that election. So, here's Trump giving, I think, excellent advice, frankly, to multinational companies. Today, in 2019, the cost of labor, human labor, is going to be a dwindling percentage of the revenue of most companies around the world. As machines, I just was watching an ad on television, there's a new Federal Express machine that's going to start delivering packages to your door.
Wow.
An actual robot that's just going to go, no person, just going to, robot's going to come to your front door.
Wow.
I mean, there are profound changes coming here, and the United States remains this gigantic market. It makes sense, rather than trusting the Chinese to treat you fairly once you build up your Chinese operations, and to not take, you build General Motors in China 10 years from now, and you say, well, I like to pay a large dividend back to Detroit, and the dictators in China say, no, well, frankly, we're going to take your company for $1. And what are you going to do about it?
Your Amazon.com package is here.
That's right. Now I won't be able to
Oh, wait a
sleep.
minute, that's the governor. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a new Terminator movie coming out, Charles.
Well, that's good. So, and lastly, our friends in Hong Kong. Now, I've been to Hong Kong quite a few times, and it's one of my favorite cities to visit, or it was. I would not return to Hong Kong. I certainly would not invest a penny in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And there are many other parts of the world I'd like to visit first, before realizing that this is the way the mainland people are going to treat Chinese people inside their country.
Yeah.
If this is how they're going to treat their own people, I as a foreigner want no part of anything to do with Hong Kong.
Well, a friend of mine from the 3D industry who is an Austrian guy, I'm not sure if he has US citizenship or not, I think not, but he moved, after the 3D industry fell apart and a lot of us kind of left LA. He lives in Hong Kong now, married to a Chinese woman, and I just spoke to him over Facebook the other day. They're leaving. He said it's bad.
Yeah, I'm sure it's bad.
And
Sure.
he's like super European, like everybody's nice.
Right, yeah, exactly.
He's leaving.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if we can now go to the next, on this question of why is the United States in a better place than China, there's this concept I remember many decades ago at business school of capacity utilization, where you look at a productive facility and you say, what is the true output that's possible of this factory? And oftentimes what you discover when you bring in experts, not from McKinsey, the consulting firm, but true experts, you'll look at a factory and you'll say, what, actually my capacity is 3 times what I thought it was, because I have this bottleneck over here that I can cure by buying a few cheap machines, and I'll change this and change that. And very frequently the capacity, the rated capacity of a factory is much lower than the true capacity might be if you jigger it around. You've seen that, I think, in your work here. I mean,
you can always find efficiencies in anything that you're doing, particularly as you become more advanced in doing it and discover new methods, et cetera.
Right. So if you were, we talked about this before, if you were to try to do something like this 30 years ago,
No, couldn't do it.
well, you couldn't do it exactly. You could try to do it, right? But it would be absurdly expensive and it wouldn't work, et cetera.
Staff,
But
equipment.
So what's the capacity of Crowdsource the Truth? Who knows, right? It could be 10 times what you're doing. It could be 100 times what you're doing. It could be.
Depends on how many lawsuits are happening at a given time.
No, but if you you see what I'm saying? So, but I bring this up to say the capacity is a squishy figure, right? It's understated typically. By the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve Bank's calculation, the American economy across all of its sectors, manufacturing, service, the digital economy, is today operating at 78% of its capacity, meaning that it has, it never wants to operate at 100%, but it has substantial spare capacity. If you have substantial spare capacity in an economy, you shouldn't invest. There's no real, you don't really need to invest all that much money. Just use what you have, try to produce more of what you have, right? So if the largest market in the world has substantial spare capacity, why does a much smaller market in the world, China, investing more in the last 11 years than we invested? So we look at this. This is a very instructive table I know it's bad for people who don't like numbers, but China from 2007 to 2017, or as Trump would say, China, invested $39 trillion. That's all of China.
It's good money if you can get it, Charles.
But that's over 11 years, the 11 remaining years that we have.
39 trillion?
That's the opposite of 93 trillion, right?
Good point.
This is the entire economy in China. everything that they did, all the fake cities and plants and roads and whatever, they only spent 39 trillion. But this nitwit, AOC, is not backing off the idea, and people support her. And I don't know if you still have that bouncing balloon.
11 years that China spent 39 trillion, you're saying, and then now AOC is talking about.
Yeah, this. I was trying to put AOC's head on this thing, but I mean, she and Beto O'Rourke, they're just yapping away in the wind, throwing numbers out. We got to do it immediately. The world's going to fall apart in 11 years if we don't spend 93 trillion. Don't ask how much the Chinese spent in 11 years. They only spent 39 trillion. But we're going to spend 93 trillion on a Green New Deal that she can't explain.
Well, I personally find, Charles, in addition to these amazing floats, whatever they're called, another good way to sell your unsellable goods is to just get a giant inflatable gorilla. That always seems to go hand in hand with whatever that thing we were just looking at is called.
So how did willful ignorance, anyway, so investment, the Chinese invested, if you believe these numbers which come from the UN, UNCTAD, they invested 39 trillion over 11 years. They consumed, their population only consumed 34 trillion, right? So for the home market, you don't invest $39 trillion to serve a home market that only consumes 33 trillion. That just doesn't make any sense. They clearly were investing this amount of money, if that's the real number, to try to dominate the global market. And you can go back and you can look at Japan. These figures go back to this time period. Look at Japan in the 70s through 89 to see the relationship of Japan's absurd spending spree in relation to its much larger, actually, consumption at the time. And people were writing then that Japan was trying to dominate the global markets. They were over-investing. It didn't make any sense. So you look at China. They have, by my calculation, well, first you compare it to the United States. In the United States case, we only invested 36 trillion. So if you take 36 and 39, that's $75 trillion. Largest economy in the world. We only together invested $75 trillion in everything across this country. But the nitwit
Green New Deal
wants to spend 93 trillion, and nobody, what I would have done as Nancy Pelosi, which is a scary thought, both what I would have done and Nancy Pelosi, is I would have directed whoever runs the House to get that person, AOC, up to my, and say, listen, you're not going, you're a congressman, I'm the Speaker of the House, okay? You're not going to sell a demonstrably foolish plan so aggressively without running it by people who know how to add and subtract and know what economies actually look like. You're not going to do that because you're making a fool out of the Democratic Party. And you're putting us in a place where we have to publicly rebuke you. Like, you really want to do that? That could be why AOC's, that and the criminal actions against, could be why
she's sort of piping down a little bit.
A little bit.
By the way, if I could pause time, there'd be a Charles as Nancy Pelosi graphic on the screen right now.
Don't do that. Oh man, I wish I hadn't said that. Anyway, so I like ratios, and simple ratios. Look at the amount spent as a percentage of the amount consumed. So in China, they're regularly spending on this whole period 117% of consumption. United States, we only spend 29%. See that figure over on the right. That makes more sense to me. It seems a little high even that we'd spend that much money. If you think about a company, very few companies spend 29% of their revenues on capital expenditures. That's a pretty hefty amount. So you look at this, and as a numbers person, I would say, well, what this tells me is either we're screwing up massively or China's screwing up massively. But one of us has got it wrong. Yes, China didn't have the infrastructure that we had when they started on their spending spree in 1989, but stuff that you put up in 1989 is now 30 years old and is probably not all that valuable. There may be some stuff that's unusually valuable for different reasons, but any building that you put up 30 years ago is going to have certain significant maintenance issues in 2019. So either we're spending too little capital or China spent way too much, and these numbers are wrong.
Well, it seems like building all these abandoned cities would...
Kind of foolish.
Well, and it also seems like that's part of the spending too much. That seems like something that even I can see, like, Why
Well-
are you investing in a city that there's nobody to live in?
Well, on the subject of fake investment projects, like the Clinton Foundation's $165 million, Little Rock pleasure palace, that should have probably cost $80 million. The game of saying that you actually spent much more money than you really spent is a game that allows you to siphon large amounts of money outside of China to friendly banks, et cetera. So to me, this reeks of fraud and vulnerability. And I'm not saying that we're doing it perfectly. If you took, you said the right ratio for a country like China that didn't have our infrastructure was, let's say, 50%. I'll do this math for you quickly. That means that they should have invested 50% of consumption is 16.8 trillion. Instead, they invested 39 trillion, which means they invested roughly $23 trillion too much. Or there's 23 trillion of fake investment projects on the books, encouraged by people like the construction firms and the consulting firms and the GEs of this world. Look at China. These are people who in 1988 had little experience with modern commerce. And you bring in Jeff Immelt or Jack Welch and these other, the chairman of Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs and then the president of Harvard or whatever, and you tell the Chinese who don't really have much experience, you should go down this track, and then you get Jeffrey Epstein in a side room saying, if you agree to say that these projects are more valuable than they really are, that you spent more on them.
We won't release these photos of you raping a child.
Right, and you could have some money in Switzerland. So
my God.
Anyway, so I actually think Trump, and then a further point on Trump, the Chinese are saying, well, you know what we're going to do to compete on exports? We're now going to devalue. Well, if you devalue, let's say hypothetically.
I don't think people understand what that means, that China's devaluing their currency. Trump has said it since the campaign. What does it mean?
It means that they're depressing the value of the yuan. They're making it
more money?
Well, there are different techniques of doing it, but the point is that their products, their car, overnight becomes, in dollar terms, 10% less expensive for an American to buy because the foreign exchange rate weakens for the Chinese currency versus the U.S. So,
but isn't it pointless? Because then they've got all these yuan that they can't use to buy stuff.
Well, the real reason it's pointless is they say they spent $39 trillion on their investments, and they just suffer with that devaluation, an instant $3.9 trillion paper loss. The value of these investments converted to dollars now is worth 10% less.
So
why would you do that?
Do it? Yeah, why?
Because, again, I get back to the opening point with the Chinese. It's not like we're talking about people who covered themselves with glory managing China through 1989. I mean, it was a disaster inside China. Millions, tens of millions of people starved to death. There was no infrastructure to speak of. There was little internal experience with modern economic practices, and it's still a dictatorship. So it's not like I love the people who try to sell books saying that China could teach the rest of the world how to run. I don't want to live in a prison camp, particularly. So I think Trump does have the upper hand, and as I said, I think he's now, to sell this thing, he's going to start saying, listen, are you in favor of despoiling the environment? You're the people who made fun of me about buying Greenland and saying that the Green New Deal was stupid. I mean, I'm telling you, the world's worst polluters live in China. Okay, we're not building coal-fired plants. They're building, one very frequently in China, every week or day, whatever. So he has the upper hand. If we go then to the next page, on the subject of climate, or Epstein rather, there's a lot in the news. I referred, Jason, when we were prepping for the show, I mentioned that there's this Mint Press News, if you hit this link.
That's Whitney Webb.
Yeah, Whitney Webb. Do you know her?
I don't know her personally, but I've been watching her reports. She's very thorough and seems to have a lot of good information about the history of Mr. Epstein and his associates.
Well, this is an extremely long article that our readers should read. Whitney contacted me, actually, and wanted to ask me questions about the Clinton Foundation, and she asked two general questions. She said, do you know anything about the Clinton Foundation? I said, well, yeah, you might want to go to the link and look at our shows. And if
Have you heard of Bill Clinton?
If you've got any specific questions. But to be fair to her, if it is I think it is a woman.
Yeah.
This is very in-depth work, a lot of links, a lot of references. Basically, the headline to this, you see where you are on the page, it goes all the way down.
It's also, I think, a three-part or four-part
Yeah,
series.
yeah, exactly. A lot of work has gone into this.
She's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, and so I would encourage our viewership to actually take the time to read this. I've only read this one in preparation for today, but I haven't read the other parts. This is the latest part. And in essence, she goes back and takes you through the various ways in which the CIA may have gotten involved in Arkansas with the Clintons, and how that MENA operation may have transitioned to Ohio with involving Epstein and Wexner.
People are telling us Whitney Webb is in Chile.
Really? Lucky
Did
for
not
her.
know that. She's definitely American. I've heard her speak. Well, maybe she's Canadian, but she doesn't have like a Chilean accent.
I've been to Chile. It's a nice place. In fact, I was in Chile this time of year
I was going to have some chili for lunch.
skiing. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, this, we won't go over it now because it's just too long, but it's excellent background that people need to try to absorb. In addition, Rolling Stone, and these are unlikely sources for me to cite, but here's Rolling Stone going through a long list of people that they believe are tied one way or another to this. This is some nice pictures.
Wow, even the royal family needs some orthodontia. That's really unbelievable. I don't know what's going on in England.
It's lead in the drinking water.
Maybe. Fluoride.
So there's a lot of good information that will come out. And unlike the early days of the Clinton Foundation, where I'd bring stuff up and the mainstream press is like, we don't want to talk about that. I mean, if we bring this up, then she won't win. And if she doesn't win, we're not going to have a corrupt seat at the table. So we don't want this to go forward.
No.
So we've talked about Corey and her digs, and this is something that she did. I asked her to give me some suggestions for people if they wanted more information on stuff that's relevant, first to Epstein, but second to the earlier work that she had done on the supposed Clinton Climate Initiative, which parenthetically doesn't exist legally. I asked her for suggestions to links, and this is something she did a number of weeks ago. All of her work is very lengthy and chock-a-block filled with exhibits and things you can check and think about. But she has done, I think, consistently some fantastic work that deserves attention and it deserves thinking it through. And is highly relevant here. Notice she's got links into Eric Holder and Kirsten Gillibrand, who I think is going to be lucky to finish out her Senate term. And she's horrible.
Full-on dope.
Yeah.
I've spoken to her personally,
Have you really?
and there's just like nothing upstairs there. I don't know what's going on.
Well,
with
they
Kirsten
needed somebody
Gillibrand.
who would step into Hillary Clinton's shoes.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would also encourage people, if they're reading Corey's digs, that they should take note that Corey is another independent journalist who can't keep doing this without the support of people who read the website. So use one of her sponsorship links there to show her that you appreciate the work.
Yeah, and so what we will do, since there's 1, 2, 3, 4 more of her digs, but I wanted to give people an easy chance to get smart on how the Clinton Climate Initiative got involved in the Caribbean and on other island projects with various governments, including the government of Norway, the government of Canada, many foreign governments, many multilateral operations, the supposed Clinton Climate Initiative, all professing to be doing solar parks and other environmentally smart ideas on sun-drenched islands around the world. But query, is that really the smartest way to get energy together, and who's minding the store, and why is so much money going to these countries that aren't actually poor in many cases?
Great beaches, and solar energy works even better if there's bikini models there.
Exactly right, yeah. And not to mention the trafficking and money laundering and all that risk. So the excellent questions that come out of her work are, how many regulators in these countries and that supposedly look after these multinational organizations that give out aid, how many of these regulators are already seriously compromised, having given bad loans or made bad deals or failed to prosecute projects which on the surface, as we'll show you in a second, are manifestly fraudulent. There is no Clinton Climate Initiative. There's no such thing. it's just it's a figment of somebody's imagination. There's no legal entity called the Clinton Climate Initiative.
Is that bad?
It's not good. So Barr has said last week that the evidence suggests a suicide, but here we have a story with our friend at Gateway Pundit where an attorney for Epstein's victims, is saying that an inside source says he was murdered. And unfortunately, where we are now is that when the Attorney General of the United States says something in connection with one of these swamp-related projects, people aren't going to believe him until they see the actual evidence. Let's see the autopsy.
Habeas corpus.
He should produce the body. Is the guy?
Well, they cremated him.
Did they already do that?
Yeah, and he's Jewish, which, I mean, that's not traditionally what Jewish people do. I think it's pretty safe to assume that he wasn't like strictly sticking to the laws of Judaism. Might have snuck a cheeseburger every now and then.
More than that.
But it is very strange. Now, I'll tell you something, Charles. I've come to believe that Jeffrey Epstein is not even dead, and I'll tell you why. Someone in Jeffrey Epstein's position has got to know every single one of these people who he has blackmail material on is going to want to kill him. So he's got to have a plan in place to prevent that, to de-incentivize people from doing that. That would include him being in jail. So if he's got some dead man switch that's going to release this information unless he's given what he wants, you got, at very least, Prince Andrew, Ehud Barak, Bill Clinton, who are motivated to make sure he gets out of that jail in some way. And I think any of those guys could orchestrate some sort of fake death. Plus, his will or whatever that was, the trust that he put together, that's super weird. The money goes to a trust, now it's sheltered from these lawsuits, but yet the lawyers who get the money can probably find a way to give it to him. Plus, he's worth $577 million. Seems like you could take 500 of that, bribe everybody, and spend the next 20 years of your life living on $77 million pretty well.
Yeah, even he.
That's what I mean. I think the guy's not dead.
Yeah. So there's going to be. This is not going to go away. Absent an alien invasion or World War III or stock panic or something like that. It's not going to get off the front pages anytime soon. In my
Jeffrey
opinion.
Epstein. We'll have to see what happens to this guy.
Yeah. Then we have this story in the New Republic is interesting, that there a number of so-called intellectual enablers. This guy is a literary agent. And you know how people will come to you and at a party or whatever and say they have this great idea. And I unfortunately am not a great poker player. I don't even like playing poker, but when somebody comes to me with a straight up stupid idea, I can't, my face just reveals immediately what I think. And so Epstein here was gathering people on his island and his places to have these intellectual conversations about transhumanism, how humans are going to become machines, and the future of science, and he wanted to seed the population. These are the ravings of a lunatic, and to me, you think back about this is not the first time that a straight up fraudster waltzes into New York and concocts these tales that people believe. I mean, take the case of the Italian guy, Folieri. A young 20-year-old guy comes in and he starts selling this tale that this is nothing we can do. Hillary's babysitting. There's nothing we can do. The children are screaming in the background. And this Folieri guy comes in his 20s and says his father is in charge of selling off excess real estate of the Pope. And
oh yeah, that's Anne Hathaway's boyfriend.
Right, and the Clinton Global Initiative crowd they're all in. Bill goes vacations in the Dominican Republic with Anne Hathaway and Hillary and maybe Chelsea, and Folieri decides he's going to set up the Folieri Foundation, and even makes
the foundation
press releases about what he's doing, and all these supposed smart people buy into this crap, and that's what the fraudster community knows.
Here's John McCain getting onto a yacht with this Folieri dude.
Oh, he was on with Folieri, really?
Oh yes, this is John McCain right here. You can tell by his
John McLean.
Well, he's got those. He can't he's been beaten down and whatever, so he had that problem. There's Anne Hathaway. This is Fabrizio or whatever his name is, right?
Raffaello?
Raffaello, yeah. But that's John McCain going on the yacht, and I've heard that there was allegedly some sort of goings-on with Oleg Deripaska relative to this yacht trip. But then, Charles, there's this other item where I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying about transhumanism, but it seems to be already happening because Elon Musk has demonstrated this, computer chip that's going to go into people's brains that's intended to be, I don't know who would be crazy enough to do this. I don't want any kind of brain surgery ever, but the only time I would consider it would be if it would save my life. Voluntary brain surgery sounds like the opposite of smart, but he's shown a chip that's going to somehow interface with neurons in the brain and allow you to control a computer. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I think Elon Musk is not somebody high in the list of people I trust. So, but I hear you. So, just moving through this, one of the people implicated in the Epstein revelations is George Mitchell. Now, George Mitchell, up until this came out, had a reputation of being brought in to solve the most thorny problems. Remember, he was given credit by Bill Clinton for being the architect of the Northern Ireland peace accords and very popular in Ireland. But he seems to have been involved with lots of dodgy things. And for a guy like this, if you're that lily-white clean and dealing with scandals, dealing with complex international, potentially Nobel Prize-winning efforts like arranging peace in Northern Ireland, you don't want to be spending too much time with Epstein, I don't think.
No.
And so this to me betrays a shocking lapses in judgment, and we need to now go back over this Mitchell guy, because apparently Mitchell was involved had some role as a special prosecutor or something with this Philadelphia clergy sex abuse thing. So I think we need to go into his background with clear eyes and forget what we may have assumed about George Mitchell, and were there some serious issues with him? And then finally on the Epstein stuff, if we go to the last one, this guy Bill Richardson, I've never liked him. He's flippant,
the New Mexico
flippant guy, and
governor, what was he?
And here we have CBS, highlighting that there's a story about Epstein to be told in New Mexico. Well, exactly why did Epstein go to New Mexico? Why was Richardson, as a governor and former governor in New Mexico, involved in anything to do with Epstein?
Yeah.
And what was really going on that ranch? Was it used as a transit point to ship contraband into the United States, to maybe traffic in people or whatever? And who knew about this? I mean, it's not like when some New Yorker goes out to New Mexico and buys a gigantic ranch.
Everybody's going to know.
Yeah, the locals don't say, well, we're not going to. No interest in that. Whatever he wants to do.
Everybody's always nosy about that.
They're going to that guy just went in and he bought 400, little girl swimsuits, and the thing doesn't even have a swimming pool.
Well,
anyway.
The other question, Charles, why did they not send one team to Teterboro, one team to this place in New Mexico, and another team to Little St. James, all on the same day, clamp the thing down, kick out all the employees, shut it down, put yellow tape around everything, and don't let anybody back? It's over a month, and any evidence would be destroyed.
Yeah.
The ranch is called El Comador?
I don't know. No, it's called the Zorro Ranch.
What was that El Comador? That's really just so strange that they didn't catch this guy sooner.
So if we go to the next page, I brought up the Clinton Climate Initiative. We did, of course, that episode, Green Regs and Scam, where we talked about this in some depth. But this is a different cut at it, because since really 2006, when at that same Clinton Global Initiative that I was referring to, where they praised Folieri shortly before he was put in Rikers Island, they announced they were going to do this Clinton Climate Initiative. Okay? Now, in the past, I've explained, and people can look at this link. Don't bring it up, Jason, because we've done it before many times. But if you want some facts and links to sources about how you're supposed to operate under American and Arkansas law, a foundation, you will learn that in order to be a validly an organization where you can have high confidence as a donor that your donation will be deemed by the IRS over time to be validly tax exempt, the recipient organization, the Clinton Foundation in this case, has to be organized lawfully and at all times since the date it was organized, not the date it was incorporated, but the date it was organized, where trustees or directors came together, signed articles of incorporation or signed amended articles of incorporation, signed bylaws, conducted business, appointed auditors, appointed professionals, started hiring. At all times, you have to be organized and operated lawfully in your home state of Arkansas, in any other state where you operate, in contemplating federal law and international law if you're going to do international work. So in order to go from being this thing that was supposed to house the presidential records of Bill Clinton's 2 terms in a special purpose-built park in Little Rock, in order to do anything other than that lawfully under U.S. law, I'm told, you would have to amend the Articles of Incorporation of this Clinton Foundation to, in quotes, fight climate change internationally, which is what the Clinton Climate Initiative supposedly was going to do. All right? And it has not ever lawfully received approval from the IRS to extend these activities. You can't just change your Articles of Incorporation. You have to also go to the IRS before you want to change them and say, you know, I've done a piss poor job, you know, overseeing this Little Rock-based theme park that I've managed to let some $100 million or so disappear through fraudulent accounting and lack of accounting. I did such a bad job of that now I want to fight climate change. I think they started out fighting global warming even. They didn't even say they were fighting climate change. Back then it was sort of fight warming, not cooling.
It's kind of cool today for August.
It sure is. I guess that's all because of climate change. But anyway, so you have to, as a technical legal matter, you would have had to amend their Articles of Incorporation, and the records that are available through the Secretary of State's office online in Arkansas show that they have never amended the purposes of the parent Clinton Foundation, now called Bill Hillary Chelsea Clinton Foundation, to do anything other than, as a tax-exempt operation, anything other than this Little Rock complex. So eventually they get caught. And maybe it was because the Obama team comes in after January 20th, 2009, and this idiot, Andrew Kessel, and I'll show you why I say that in a second, decides that the way to work around here for this Clinton Climate Initiative, which did start working in 2006, is to fill out a form incorrectly on the 29th of April 2009, file it with the Arkansas Secretary of State, and say that they want to use Clinton Climate Initiative as a fictitious name. Now, this just a brief explanation of what a fictitious name is. It's a doing business as name.
Right.
If you find yourself in a given state, and in America, every state decides what a corporation can and cannot do by way of using a fictitious name. It's not like you get a fictitious name in Arkansas, you automatically have that name in all other 49 states of Washington, D.C. No, you don't.
For a tax exempt or just for any corporation?
For any corporation.
Why do they call it a fictitious name? I thought doing business as was just a normal way to change the name of a business.
Well, it's just illegal, it's just the way the lawyers talk about it. It's the same thing, one and the same. It's just a shorter.
But there's nothing wrong with doing a DBA, is there?
There is if you don't have the authority to do it.
I mean, if you send away to New York State and say, hey, my business has changed, I want to change the name, and they send you back the stamped thing, like I've got a DBA because originally we were doing one thing and then we switched to another and
That
brought
just
that
mean-
to the bank and they opened a bank account, it seemed all fine.
in New York.
Yeah.
But if you then want to do business in California with a name that is not your legal name, you have to register. You're a foreign corporation in California because you're based in New York. There's a process whereby in California, you come into that foreign state, you want to use that DBA name, you've got to seek approval for it, right? Now, if you're a charity, it's different. Charity is a corporation, so yes, you could argue that the fictitious name idea does apply to charities, but charity regulation is tighter. Charities say, under charity law, you can't use a fictitious name to conduct a purpose you're not authorized for. You can't do that. Otherwise, that you'd have no regulation of charities. If you go in and you say, I want to do a presidential library in Little Rock, And then that's what you tell the IRS, that that's all you're going to do. But you're going to turn around and use this idiot Kessel who knows nothing about charity, as far as I can tell, and it's just a convenient. His price, whatever it was met by the Clintons, and he just decided to take all the incoming slings and arrows that are coming his way, because there is this Arkansas Business Corporation Act does allow you to use a fictitious name, but there are forms, and we have secured those forms that the Clinton Foundation filed. Not a single one of them is accurate. Oh. Some are, obviously by the pattern and practice of their deceptive filings. 13 examples we're going to show you of them screwing it up in a little bit. But so yeah, the Arkansas Business Corporation Act allows you to do it, but you got to only submit forms. You can't type something up that looks like a form, and you got to fill them all out. If you're going to use a fictitious name, you got to say for what purpose are you using the name, and then you've got to say when did you start using this fictitious name. You got to tell them the date, and they didn't fill those forms out properly at all. And then the Arkansas Nonprofit Corporation Act of 1993 has even tighter requirements for authorizing a tax-exempt nonprofit corporation under Arkansas law to get an Arkansas state tax exemption, which you need to get. And there's a long memo, we put it up before, they didn't comply with those laws. Then there's, on top of this, and I'm sure there are other laws, and I'm not a lawyer, but there's 3 here that show that the Clinton Climate Initiative is fiction.
Quick question, Charles. Was Clinton the governor in 87 and not in 93?
He was president in 93 and he was the governor in 87.
So that's interesting that he makes it easier and then somebody comes in and makes it harder. Isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, the 93 Act was a tightening of a preceding act, I think from 57 or 45 or something like that, that brought it into the 90s. But yeah, it is interesting. So this other one, there's a deceptive trade practice law in Arkansas, even in Arkansas.
You must deceive those you trade with.
No, no. It specifically, it says, these practices include, but are not limited to, and you get to number 7, making a false representation that distributions solicited for charitable purposes shall be spent in a specific manner for specified purposes. In other words, saying to the public that, in your articles of incorporation, that you're just going to do a Little Rock presidential library in a specific portion of Little Rock, then soliciting money for that purpose, but spending it on climate change, is a violation, in my view, of the deceptive and unconscionable trade practices section of this law here, section 4, number 88107. There's a link to it. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. And remember, this Clinton Climate Initiative is an initiative which certain governments start giving a lot of money to in 2007. Mm-hmm. Doesn't exist. Okay, so we'll look at the next page. Now, sorry, did I jump over something there? Let's look at the preceding page for a second. Okay. Next page then, sorry. These figures are actually for the Clinton Climate Initiative, okay? These are figures that are purposefully excluded from the Clinton Foundation website because they're so incriminating, in my view. And what we've done is we found them on New York state filings. New York is a tougher regulatory environment than many states. The real BKD financial audits, in quotes, for 2007, 8, and 9 create component analysis of the big pieces of the Clinton Foundation. How much revenue and expense did they have?
What do you mean the real BKD?
The real BKD audit, not the one that's on the Clinton Foundation website, which excludes this information by design because it's so incriminating, in my opinion. So I amalgamated it here, but we take the contributions and grants and the modest amount of investment income for this thing that didn't legally exist. They claim they took in $28.5 million directly, and that other entities net transferred them 1.8 million. So in other words, the Clinton Foundation raised money for the Clinton Climate Initiative illegally and then transferred it to an entity that didn't exist. All in, just in this time frame, 2007 to 2009, an entity that legally didn't exist collects $30 million of money. Now, the most important figure, in my opinion, on a charity financial statement is their direct program expenses. That's like money you really can say, I spent this on my mission. They take in $30 million. Jason, how much did they spend of that on direct programs?
I mean, unless this is an abbreviation for like a trillion, it looks like 63 grand.
Yeah, that's their numbers. They're admitting they took in $30 million for climate change, but only spent $63,000.
It seems like Bill Clinton could just write a check for $63,000 and then go spend the rest of the year doing something else.
Or actually, just take a tenth of one of his speech fees.
Right.
But so they set this thing up. All they spend, these are, BKD, remember, reviewed these numbers. Nobody at BKD evidently had the common sense to say, now, wait a minute, where is there any argument that the Clinton Climate Initiative can do any of this stuff to begin with? And why did they raise $30 million to spend $63,000 on direct programs? It just doesn't. And then what's the other stuff that they spent money on? To spend $63,000 on direct programs, they felt it necessary to spend $14 million on salaries. It's ridiculous. What are these people doing? And the bad news for the FBI and the bad news for the Clinton Foundation is there's a list that somebody has of person, salary, benefit, period, that a real investigator, just as they went after Manafort, can go in and say, all right, who are these people who earned $14.2 million in 3 years? Who do they still live? Let's go pay them a nice 5 o'clock visit.
Yeah,
and find out what the hell was really going on here.
Seems like paying them is the real purpose of the charity.
Right, and then for your professional, you're going to spend $63,000 on direct programs, but then on your professional expenses and your consulting, you're going to spend $8.9 million.
What would a legitimate charity have approximately in that direct program?
85% would be of $30 million. $25 million would be direct.
$20 million or something.
Yeah, and there's something way off here. $8.9 million on professional and consulting fees, $6 million on travel. Remember, you're only supposed to operate in Little Rock, and you've got this gigantic building you overpaid for. Why would you need on top of that building to spend $1.2 million on rent? It's just mind-numbing. All right, so then they claim they spent more than they earned, $30.4 million, $31.1 million including these miscellaneous expenses. So they lost in the period $808,453.
Wow.
Now let's think about, I'm somebody who's trained to spot fraud or at least through the work that I've done in investing. How much cash did the Clinton Climate Initiative start with on December 31st, 2006? The answer to that question is $808,453. It's right here. Okay?
Where'd they get that?
Well, exactly where do they get that? But do we think it's a little odd that this complex thing, and remember this is an accounting firm has gone in and supposedly vetted these numbers, that in 2000, if you could go up a little bit there. Yeah, by the end of 2008, remember, they only register the fictitious name for the Clinton Climate Initiative in April of 2009. So by 2008, the end of 2008, their revenues and their loss has exactly equaled to the penny
It's just
the starting cash that they came up with. It's just this doesn't sound like an allocation that somebody said, look, make sure this Clinton Climate Initiative doesn't exist. Make sure that by the end of December 31st, 2008, in the transition period before Barack Obama is president, when there are all these emails that should be running around saying, holy shit, how did this happen? How do we raise $17.9 million for an entity that doesn't exist and spend it on all this consulting and blah, blah. We better make sure that this thing has no net worth. So let's cook the books, we'll over-allocate direct expenses, and there has to be a record in the supposed Clinton Climate Initiative files, the donor files, the FBI files. There has to be a record of people saying, wait a minute, these numbers. And then the next year, 2009, markets are melting down around the world. Volatility, GE gets to 666 on March 6th, 2009, or 7th. And currencies are turmoiling. This thing's operating all over the place. And its revenues of $12.5 million, 12,467,401, exactly equal the expenses of the Clinton Climate Initiative, 12,467,401, and they have no change in net assets for the year. The chance of that being a legitimate set of financial statements is zero. There's no way that happened. This is an allocation, this is an invention, this is an epic fraud that BKD put its name on the 2007, 8, 2009 financial statements. It put its name on these component numbers that are completely wrong. There is a bigger piece, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, which has a similar story, but we're talking there about hundreds of millions of dollars. BKD put its name on that, and BKD has been covering up this fraud for the Clinton Foundation ever since it became involved in it, whenever it became involved in it, sometime in the early 2001-2 period. So any trained person and I don't even have an accounting degree. I may have taken 2 or 3 accounting courses. Any trained certified public accountant who cared about his or her CPA and cared about the profession would look at this and call it the fraud that it is, and would be demanding, would not have issued financial statements. So where's the record of BKD? What letter did they get from the Clinton Foundation?
F.
No, you get a management representation letter where the Clinton Foundation executives would say, we got this right and we got this wrong, don't worry about this, and the Clinton Climate Initiative really exists. Where's all that evidence? Has the FBI looked at any of this stuff? What's taking so long? How come nobody's talking? And most importantly, how come governments have given more money, even more money than $30 million to the Clinton Climate Initiative ever since 2009? This Corey Digg article, these 5 Corey Diggs articles, we're talking about billions of dollars have gone to projects linked to the Clinton Climate Initiative. This still doesn't exist. Okay? Go to the next page. So we've talked about this ridiculous memorandum of understanding between the incoming Obama administration and what passes for the Clinton Foundation. And we've provided you a link to it in the past. And I draw your attention to, the foundational, if you will, element of the whole document is the background section, where they say, a single entity. No, that's not right. There is no single entity, the William J. Clinton Foundation, that is, at the time of this thing, November 16, 2008, a validly organized public charitable organization. I draw the distinction here between the Gates Foundation, which is a private foundation. A public charity has to act independently. It cannot engage in partisan political activities. It can't be controlled by a family. This statement is on its face false. It was not a valid 501c3 public charitable organization. It did not lawfully comprise the library and 7 initiatives. The Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative didn't exist. Climate Initiative didn't exist. Hunter Development didn't exist. They don't even mention, and they don't even file in Arkansas anything to get the fictitious name Clinton Juicer Sustainable Growth Initiative. They never file for the Clinton Economic Opportunity Initiative. I don't even know what that is. That's probably, we got to pay Chelsea's college expenses, and we got mansion expenses, and travel expenses, and hooker expenses, and mistress expenses, and whatever expense. They never filed for the Alliance for a Healthier Generation prior to setting up illegally the Alliance for a Healthier Generation in 2010. They never filed one properly for the Clinton Global Initiative. So none of this is actually right, yet the genius Valerie Jarrett said, okay, signature, here it is. Beautiful. We got a memorandum of understanding. We're going to be in this fraud business together. We're joined at the hip. Okay. Then they talk. This is a memo, a document that's signed by the CEO of the Clinton Foundation, Bruce Lindsay, and by Valerie Jarrett on dated November 16th, 2008. So she couldn't possibly have done any due diligence, Valerie Jarrett. And in it, describing the Clinton Foundation, if we just lift this up a little bit on the page so people can see it, thank you. It says here, did I make this up? Launched in 2006, Clinton Climate Initiative, right? And it says here, making a significant contribution to the battle against, does it say climate change, Jason?
No.
It says global warming. So when did they change it to climate change? I mean, it wasn't launched in 2006. Rupert Murdoch shouldn't have given money to this thing, and apparently the Murdochs gave $5 million over time to the Clinton Foundation. Certainly Barbara Streisand should not have given the $1 million she claims she gave to this Clinton Climate Initiative. And it says here, they're working with 40 of the world's largest cities. Okay, where's the evidence of that? 40 of the world's largest cities. Give me a list. make Freedom of Information requests. What the hell was it actually doing? It says here it was doing an energy efficiency building retrofit program. Now let's think about that. Why is that charitable? You're going into a city and you're saying, you ought to redo these buildings, or the insulation isn't right and the boiler isn't right and whatever. We got to take the old boiler out, put a new boiler in, change the windows, change the insulation.
It just sounds like business.
It's a business decision. So it says, it's working with major cities, with colleges, universities, and private businesses. And here, because the Clintons never like to lie small, they say they're retrofitting hundreds of millions of square feet. This is by November of 2008. There's no entity. How can you, hundreds of millions of square feet of public and private buildings is one shit ton of buildings, right? And don't you think that Siemens and General Electric and people who are trying to sell the equipment to these cities, are real happy to get around and go to these meetings involving, the Clintons and whatever, and these cities to talk about projects which are just business exercises, right? This is not charity in the slightest, and it's way outside the charter of the Clinton Foundation. And the IRS should have seen this. The tax authorities in these states and cities and governments should have seen this. And then it says they've got a purchasing alliance. A purchasing alliance is not a charity. A purchasing alliance is a business, right? And it's working with Microsoft, okay, to track emission trading, carbon trading, which carbon credit trading is notoriously now known to have been corrupt.
And created by Al Gore.
Al Gore, yeah. But notice, in this MOU, it says the only government donor to CCI is Australia. Now, this is written November 16th, 2008. How much due diligence did dopey Alexander Downer do on this Clinton Foundation before he arranged for the government of Australia to give it 25 million US between 2006 and 2008, when there was no Clinton Climate Initiative, there was no Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative? And is it any surprise that Alexander Downer would be the person brought in to try to make an example of Papadopoulos? Stephanopoulos needs to be made an example of. There's just too many strings here. This Clinton Climate Initiative was and remains a fraud. Donors who sent money to this Clinton Climate Initiative did not do their diligence or willingly got involved in this fraud for some other benefits that we don't yet know about. And this is not a small set of operations. Michael Smith, if you hit this link here, has done incredible amount of work on fantastic work back in 2016 and afterwards, talking about this Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative, but in particular about this woman, Ruby Shang. We've talked about her in the past. Why the FBI hasn't sat down with Ruby Shang, who claims to have been working on thousands of projects from an office in Singapore. It's not disclosed.
Singapore is kind of sketchy, Charles.
Right, but I mean, this is just so far outside the remit of the Clinton Foundation. Here Smith does all this work. He did article after article during the election season. Here's Ruby Shang.
Kevin W. points out that it's convenient that they're working with 40 cities, the very same as the C40 Climate Initiative.
So that's exactly what it is. So the C40 later is an outgrowth of the Clinton, of this thing. And C40, I contacted them back in 2016 or 17, their lawyers or their accountants, and I said, listen, you've got a serious problem here. I've heard Bupkis back. C40 is the thing that Mike Bloomberg operated. In theory, you say that you're going to get the largest polluters and emissions of pollution in the world, the cities together to figure out how to go state of the art and release less pollution into the air. Yeah, that makes sense, maybe. But are cities notorious in the purchasing departments of cities? Are they notoriously corrupt? Is it not common for city officials to say, I'll tell you the way things are going to work here. We got this $2 billion purchasing order, and I got this college tuition for 5 kids, and I got a country house I can't pay for, and why don't you, slip me some Benjamins and a few suitcases over here, and then you'll get the contract. I mean, this happens all day long, sadly, around the world. So we're taking you through, of any serious government would have the ability, particularly a rich government, would have the ability to look at this presentation here and say, all right, is Ortel off his rocker, or is this correct? And how much money did we give to this Clinton Climate Initiative? I want to know every donation that we gave. I want to know the date of it. I want to know how the thing evolved. I want the email traffic surrounding it. I want to know who signed off on it. I want to know who was supposed to look at this, who was supposed to do the due diligence. I want the whole record on my desk, and I want it Monday morning or you're out of a job. It's the kind of thing I'd be doing if I were, in a government of, let's say, England that had been involved in projects, or Australia, or maybe Norway, or Sweden, just to pick on a few, Germany, and Netherlands. I'd say, wait a minute. This Clinton Climate Initiative never actually existed. Why were we giving it money? And why did it take in $30+ million and spend only $68,000 on direct program expenses? Who thought that was a good idea?
I did.
Yeah.
Mostly good.
So if we just go into the slides, at the very end, we've brought this memo up before, or this work that Michael Smith had done before. I mean, in 2018, we had Michael Smith on the program, remember, early in January with Crocodile Dundee and all that.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, people in Australia were asking questions. What happened to $88 million from Australian taxpayers that went towards the Clinton Foundation? We had no answer on that yet.
Huh. 2014, 88 million.
Between 2006 and 2014.
Right. Okay. It's very strange, Charles.
Yep.
Okay, so back to the slide.
Thank you. So,
yeah, or still there?
No, 9. 9 is good. So, did this happen once, the fictitious name, or did it happen more than once, Jason? What's your guess looking at this slide?
I already know the answer, so I'd be cheating.
All right. Well,
13 times.
that we know of.
Yeah.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, if somebody wanted to check me, and go in the Secretary of State and request this information for yourself, you get all the filings that you can find. I've left out the several times they amended their Articles of Incorporation, just focusing on how many times the Clinton Foundation illegally, deceptively filed applications for fictitious names in Arkansas prior to doing it for the Clinton Climate Initiative in April of 2009. The answer to the question would be 13 freaking times they did this. So it's not like, one time we screwed up. Starting before the National Archives was defrauded on November 18th, 3 separate times, Andrew Kessel typed up a form which he signed asking for the fictitious name William J. Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, and the Clinton Museum Store, not using a form, incorrectly claiming he had authority to seek the fictitious name under the Arkansas Non-Corporation Act of 1993, which he didn't. It doesn't regulate fictitious names. And then, where you're supposed to, on the form, list the activity that you're seeking to do under the fictitious name, he says, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
And
hookers and blow is not tax exempt, so you can't put that in.
I can't do that. So the 3rd of January 2006, remember, after they realized they couldn't merge lawfully the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, they couldn't continue running it. They concocted a merger, which was illegal. We've talked about that many times. But they said, for good measure, we'll just register the fictitious name. Remember, these fictitious names, if it were done right, could only be used in Arkansas. It would be a first step. You would do it correctly in Arkansas, and then you wanted to use this name in New York, you'd have to do the same thing in California, whatever. They did none of this right. Kessel uses the wrong form. He claims that he's has authority under the Arkansas Business Corporation Act of 1987, but he doesn't describe this activity. You're supposed to describe it. You're supposed to describe the date that it began. He doesn't do that. He does the same thing for something, this Clinton Small Business Initiative, that doesn't exist lawfully. There's no such thing. It's a small piece of the puzzle. It could be the Economic Opportunity Initiative that was mentioned in the MOU, but he makes the same mistake with that one, and then he makes the same mistake with the Clinton Global Initiative, which held its first meeting in 2005 in New York without any authority, right? To great fanfare. By May 8th of 2008, remember this is as Hillary's campaign, aborted first campaign for president, was going down the toilet bowl.
With the server.
And the server was to come later. It was anyway. They get together with this Tom Hunter character who had pledged a lot of money for the Clinton-Hunter Development Initiative. That's a whole other story we've done. But Bruce Lindsay gets brought in the frame, and he again uses the wrong sort of form, or fills the format incorrectly. He claims authority to do this under the Arkansas Nonprofit Corporation Act, which is not true. Doesn't describe properly the activities of the Hunter Development Initiative. Doesn't seek to amend the Articles of Incorporation as he should have done, and doesn't date it. Doesn't say when the activities began. The activities for this thing began before May 8th, 2008. Then in July 8th, they do 3 more times, for good measure. They're not going to do anything like partially wrong. They really want to jump off the World Trade Center and go all the way down to the concrete. They had this meeting with Dianne Feinstein in Dianne Feinstein's house on June 5th, 2008, to smoke a peace pipe between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Now they're trying to wallpaper up everything, and they say, well, we better make sure we have fictitious names for something called the Clinton Global Initiative, Asia. There was no authority to do a Clinton Global Graft Initiative in Asia, yet they filed for the fictitious name, Kessel did. Wrong form again, wrong references, everything's wrong, nothing's right. They create this university. Trump has been in the crosshairs of the New York State Attorney General for using the Trump University. The Clinton Foundation, and he has to pay whatever it was, $25 million fine, and he's still in the crosshairs over that. The Clintons are swanning around the world today bragging about running a university, the Clinton Global Initiative University, that has never been formed lawfully, has operated in multiple states, held multiple meetings around the world, has cockamamie projects it claims it do that make no sense whatsoever. It's not a charity. And by the way, Bill and Hillary made $17.6 million personally off of the joint venture partner in this, Laureate Education. So they do that, and then they file for the Clinton Global Initiative again, wrong. Then they figure that's not enough to get wrong before the election, so let's do 3 more things wrong. Let's file to operate restaurants, which, you can't operate a restaurant as, let's say, a place to hold campaign meetings for Hillary Clinton or for Democrats.
Do they do that in the restaurant?
Of course,
inside the place?
it's a banquet hall to throw parties for friends of Bill and Hillary. 2 different restaurants. And then for good measure, just to be vague, they set up this thing, the Clinton Initiatives.
But wait, sorry, Charles, what would be the proper way to do that? Have some other business run the restaurant inside the place? Like, how can you have a charity? I mean, it's not unreasonable to have a restaurant in a library, right?
Possibly, but the proceeds from the restaurant should be used to further the tax-exempt
Purpose of the charity.
purposes, not fighting climate change, not doing everything that was wrong. And you're not supposed to use the restaurant for political stuff to enhance or try to enhance.
So any charity involved with any kind of political anything, it's not allowed to do?
Not allowed.
Even if you're educating people about?
There's a fine line when you should get into very tough questions there. When you're educating somebody, are you indoctrinating them, or are you exposing them to both sides, many sides of you? If you say you're educating when in fact you're indoctrinating in a charity, that's illegal. And you certainly can't use it to just only favor Democrats or only favor Clinton supporters or only have a banquet hall so that when Bill's got his pool parties, emulating Epstein up on the penthouse, he's got whatever he's eating for and serving to his bevy of beauties cannot be paid for out of the funds that flow through the library. So there are 13 examples, just 13 examples. People say, well, Charles, there are no facts. Here's 13 examples of pattern and practice of illegal behavior, where you're trying to confuse the world and claim that the Clinton Foundation can do whatever it wants, because that's what Bill does, Hillary does. They do whatever they want. Now, the situation got bad enough that here this Kamiki Gibson lady, November 10th, if we hit this link, just so people can see it, she puts together this memo, which is, on the same level as the Doug Band memo. At least she's not claiming that she made all these mistakes. The way Ben was
Lindsay right
bragging
there.
about making all the mistakes. She's just saying, holy shit, I've been studying this for several months. This thing's a mess. And it goes directly to the guy, Bruce Lindsay, who signs the MOU. You know, it's dated 6 days after this memo, saying the Clinton Foundation is fantastic. He gets the memo. Here it is. You know, you can scroll down the page. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's a lengthy memo. And any person who's trying to figure out, did the Clinton Foundation break the law? And more importantly, did they knowingly break the law? And for how long have they knowingly been breaking the law? Remember, Bruce Lindsay is Bill Clinton's consigliere. He's the guy that Bill has used for every tough position. He was a deputy White House counsel during the presidency. Every tough scrape Bill gets in, Bruce Lindsay's a point person. Don't tell me Bruce Lindsay didn't know this was an epic fraud. He's the one who incorporated the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative himself. He signed the signature. Many of these bad things that were his crimes that were done by the Clinton Foundation were done by a member of the Arkansas bar, Bruce Lindsay. You know, he can't say I didn't know there were laws. I mean, he's a partner in a big law firm. So. Quickly then, I just want to close out, and I'll be very quick here on the Clinton Foundation, on the GE, sort of the same idea. Harry Markopolos really made some waves in the last week or so, issuing a report, 175-page report, basically straight up calling GE a bigger fraud than Enron. He's calling it Genron. And I made the case back in 2009 that GE should have a $2 price target. And stock back then was.
I thought that's the go out of business price.
It is. That's why I picked it. It was that simple. I said, this thing's going bust. All bankrupt stocks, I was told, traded $2 eventually, and so we'll pick $2 as the price. Anyway, here are the numbers. You know, the GE management, they get up and they say, you know, it's this restructuring, that mumbo jumbo, this jargon here. Isn't this a fantastic meeting? Would you like some more Coca-Cola? How's your steak? You know, and they just jazz up the crowd and they try to talking about this and that vision and sustainability and reliability and all this crap. You look at the numbers, okay? This thing has been on the ropes since before I started going after them in 2007, but it's had like 12 or 13 years of grace since 2007 to get its act in gear. It stumbled badly in 2008. So this new manager is the third new CEO, or the third, after Welch. He's been in there for a while. He was a director beforehand. His points on the board that he puts up for the 2 quarters ending June 30th, 2019, the revenues are down. Okay, that's never a good thing. You want revenues to go up in a business. You don't want them to go down. But what's really bad is that the profits are way down, 53% down. Now, here what I do is I take total GE revenues and I subtract out the annoying GE capital, which used to be the biggest piece of GE. It's now a pittance. And I figure out what are the total revenues, not involved in finance. Do the same thing for pre-tax income, continuing. You see that actually the capital had a turnaround. It had lost $324 million in 2018, 6 months. In 2019, it made $135 million. So that's a swing to the positive. But this gem, this residual, the engine business, the industrial business, its profits went from $1.5 billion down to $1 billion. That's never a good thing, right? In the total one. The non-finance one went from 1.8 down to 866. I mean, this is disastrous performance. You wouldn't, if I were supposed to give a press conference, I'd cancel the press conference. I'd just say, look, we're not going to waste your time. We care about global warming. We suck. We screwed up. Our revenues are down. Our profits are down more than our revenues. You know, our after-tax profits are down by 48%. You should fire me.
Oh boy, good press conference, Charles.
That's why I canceled the press conference. I wouldn't get up there and say, you know, look at this shiny apple. It's poisoned, but it's great. You know, and this is an environment where you have low interest rates since January 1st, 2009, on the floor interest rates, which would benefit a GE and a GE Capital. You have enormous government stimulus spending, not just in the US, but around the world. Multiple restructurings that didn't work, multiple acquisitions that didn't work, multiple CEO changes that didn't work, multiple other changes that didn't work. And this is where you are today, you know, having been on the inside as Larry Culp for a while. this is the best you've got on after June 30th, 2019, you just give it up, man. That Paper Chase movie, take this quarter, call your mother and tell her you're never going to be a lawyer. I mean, this is not going to work at this stage. If GE was going to go back on the uptrend, that would have happened a long time ago. A lot of people give GE, the criticisms of Markopoulos include, well, you just make money if the stock price goes down, is what they say to Markopoulos. Wait a minute. The management only makes money if the stock price goes up normally, but GE has so gamed the system that they overpay their managers. Stock price goes up, you get paid a lot of money. Stock price goes down, you get paid a lot of money. That's not the way that you should be running a business. The management has the most information in theory about this business. They should, from the inside, they should by now have been able to figure out how to rewrite this pig and get it back going in the right direction, but they haven't been able to do it. And at a certain point, we go to the next page, this is the income statement. Let's look at the balance sheet, okay? Red numbers are bad. Green numbers are, in theory, good. But when you take a gigantic step back here, Jason, just cut to the chase. The bottom line here, what is the tangible, the hard equity value in billions, these are billions of dollars, of GE excluding the finance business? Negative $25 billion.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing.
So if you're sitting there saying, wait a minute, okay, if I exclude goodwill, and there shouldn't be any, goodwill is like you buy a company for more than it says it's worth on the books. You try to get an accounting firm like BKD, God forbid, to go and value the goodwill and intangibles, and you get some hocus pocus math saying, yeah, actually, the acquisition you did made sense. Whereas in this case, these stumblebums haven't gotten anything right since April of 2008. I would call into question the goodwill is worth anything at this point, which is what this calculation I'm doing does. And it basically says that the piece of GE, excluding GE Capital, has a negative book value of $25 billion. Why would you want to invest in a company that has a negative book value? With this track record of losing money in a low interest rate environment, not being able to get your story straight, so many suspicions. Their financial statements are so complicated now. Instead of having, like a straightforward financial statement that says, here are my revenues, here are my costs by important category, here's my profit. You have to read through footnote after footnote, page after page of reconciling non-GAAP adjustments here and there. You don't need to do that to invest today. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to put my money with something that's a cipher. And I bring this up because in, I think, February of 18, I wrote a piece for the American Thinker. We'll go to the next page. I think I have a link to it, maybe. Maybe I didn't put it in this time. But, or maybe I did. Let's just see. No, I didn't. But anyway, the big question on GE is not so-called consolidated financials, which are financials for the whole ball of wax. Which, to understand whether GE is going to make it or not make it, you've got to drill down as regulators on what are GE's revenues and income, losses in this case, inside the U.S., and what are their revenues and losses outside the U.S. GE is an American company based in Boston whose primary regulator is the Securities and Exchange Commission. Let's take this apart. These are their numbers, the source is there. They say that the customers in the U.S. in 2016, they did $49 billion of revenue, and they managed to make $535 million. That's astonishingly poor performance, right? Yeah. That's probably suggesting that they shifted a profit offshore to be taxed in low tax jurisdictions. I mean, you wouldn't. Why go through the bother of selling $49 billion worth of stuff to make only $535 million? I mean, you could do that just by treasury bonds. I mean, you don't need to have conferences.
Such a low.
It's absurd.
Charles, James E. is telling us that GE designed and helped fund the Fukushima nuclear reactor.
Another one. I'm sure that's one of the
great success.
That's true, actually. That's true. So that's perhaps why in 2017 in the U.S., we got Trump in there. Things are going in theory better. What happens to GE's revenues? They go down more than 10% in the U.S., from $49 billion to $44 billion. But this time, instead of making $535 million, these geniuses lose $18.9 billion.
Wow.
That's not easy to do. To lose 43 cents. This is on your pre-tax profit, forgetting about the shenanigans with taxes and so on. To manage to lose 43 cents for every dollar of revenue, you've got to be some kind of stupid to get into that place. I mean, that is not something that you excuse by saying, well, McKinsey told me to do it this way, how was I to know? I mean, this is just brain damage to get to be in a place where you do that in 2017. In 2018, you get it down to you're only losing almost a quarter, 22 cents for every dollar of revenue. This is abysmal performance for an entity that once, was valued, whose equity was valued at 400 billion. Now it's like 70 billion. That's the notional pre-tax profit margin in the U.S. The reason I say that is they don't provide granular financial statements that give you the ability to, with confidence, say these are real numbers. These are their estimates and footnotes, and I'm creating the ratios. Now let's focus about their performance outside the U.S. Their sales in every case are greater outside the U.S. by far than they are in the U.S. Right? So who's regulating GE outside the United States? Who's making sure that GE France, to pick one country, actually has a balance sheet, their whole balance sheet's negative, that GE France is actually supported outside France by an entity that can pay its bills in France should it have to liquidate in France? Who's checking that? Clearly the French government can't do that. How are they going to know what GE is doing outside France? They probably barely know what it's doing inside France. Same question for Germany and Japan and the UK and whatever. They operate in 130 countries. Right? Who's checking all this? And look at this record. You go from 70 million revenue and 6.5 million of profit, a little better under Trump, 74 billion in revenue, 7.8 billion in 17. But in 18, you have more revenue, but you somehow manage to lose 13 cents for every dollar of foreign revenue. I mean, this is really, if you were trying to screw a business up, you couldn't do a worse job than this.
A better job of screwing it up.
Right? So if we put a link here to the this is the directory of all of their foreign activities, just to give you a sense of how complicated this is.
Does it include exploding Fukushima?
It does include Japan, actually.
Oh.
130 countries, right? And you scroll down the list just quickly. We're not going to go through all 130, but if you just go down the page, if you can, it lists out, these are all the websites of all the GE, Algeria, Angola, Egypt, Nigeria. If they can't make money in the US, how in the hell are they going to make money in Venezuela, Cambodia, Indonesia, Japan? This is an example of how not to run a business, right? You got to get your core business right in your home country. You've got to do a good job of reporting on your results to the investors at large. They've done a horrible job of that, since before I got involved with it. And needless to say, this is incredibly complicated. I mean, how could somebody sitting in any one of the regulatory bodies around the world get their arms around doing this right? So, I say that, the regulators, the government regulators, they've been practicing assisted suicide on this former iconic company. If you hit
kind of like Epstein.
This is just a link just for people who are interested in. Yeah, kind of like Epstein, except GE. This is just putting me and GE in, and you get 137,000 results.
Ooh.
I'm not trying to brag, but
it's working.
But I have made a few comments about General Electric since 2007, and I would encourage people. Here's the article I did, February 19th, 2018. I signaled this, February 19th, 2018, the trouble ahead for GE, in just the same way that I will close the presentation by saying, don't make any long-term plans if you're a trustee of the Clinton Foundation or any one of its affiliates. Don't think that you're going to have a lot of free time and that you're not going to be interacting with government authorities around the world, because you're going to be. This GE thing is coming to a close. Serious money around the world has heard the management saga, has heard Markopoulos, and has bid stock price down now to a woman's shoe size, 789. We'll see where it opens tomorrow. It's always possible to move the GE stock price by producing some idiot who's going to say, I'm a rich idiot and I'd like to buy GE, at this fire sale price. There's always somebody dumb enough to try to enjoy the spotlight of doing something like that. So you could have some rich idiot come out of nowhere and say, yeah, okay, I'll be the rich idiot who gets paid to say I'm going to save GE.
But I mean, if they buy it in bankruptcy or something, is there any way that it becomes I mean, even the name GE, if you wanted to just use like the medical equipment or the airplane engine business or something, no value there?
Again, you always have to, this mentor of mine always talked about the has-gets analysis. What do you has and what do you gets? So if you have a bunch of money, I don't need GE, right?
Right.
But so you're asking me to give up some of the bunch of money I have, what do I get? And when you look, I mean, GE, I think, is only trouble. I mean, after all, the people from the inside, if they had it right, we wouldn't need Harry Markopolos. They would come up with financial statements and a real case. There are enough accountants in GE and there are enough experts who could work for GE who would, from the inside, say, you know what? This is a cloud over GE. There's been a cloud ever since April of 2008 when we missed. We've had to pay this accounting fine, a small pittance, $50 million for us, $200 million of costs in August of 2009. We are now going to level with you, the people. We're going to say that here's the true nature of our liabilities. Here's why we haven't funded our pension plan. Here's why we can, for our retirees. Here's why we can. Here's the cash we have to pay off our environmental liabilities. Here's why Markopolos is wrong about, if he's wrong, the health liabilities. Here's why these businesses do make sense. Here's why the names, they could put that report together. But the fact that they haven't done it now, 11 years later, tells me, that there's no bull case here prior to a Chapter 11. Now, in a Chapter 11, the problem for GE in a Chapter 11 is it's so complicated. To really get to the bottom, to study GE from the inside, you first of all would have to probably hire 15 law firms to go through all the legal agreements, which are by design complicated.
So it's like a dead man walking kind of thing.
Kind of. And I have no financial position against GE, or I should say, nor members of my family. I'm not trying to make money off GE. But enough people ask me, particularly that it's in the news, what do you think? I felt I owed it to them to say. And GE's trying to give Markopolos a hard time about saying, you didn't come talk to us first.
Right.
Why would you do that? It's not like GE says, before my next quarterly news release, I want to come talking to you, Charles, and I want to get your opinion of what we're going to tell the public.
Right.
They certainly don't do that with me, and they didn't do it with Harry Markopolos. And I don't have a direct financial. I'm in some funds which may own GE stock, but which would only go down in value. Of what I'm saying, but I don't have any financial interest in GE, going out of business at present, nor do I expect to. And but even if I did, as long as I disclosed it, there's no real difference between that and everybody at GE whose interest is only in the stock price going up.
Well, Charles, changing topics, I was a little disappointed to see this. Joe Walsh confirms that he will challenge Trump for the Republican nomination. And I was really sad because when I first heard the news, I thought they were talking about Joe Walsh from the Eagles. And I was like, oh, this will be awesome. Don Henley could be the vice president. You could really get something going there. But I don't even know who this guy is. But apparently he's a former senator or congressman, and he's going to challenge the president. What does it mean when we hear them saying they're going to primary him? I mean, they're going to put other Republicans against him, but have they ever done that before with an incumbent president?
Of course, many times. Oh, sure. But it's not. I mean, this is a joke. I mean, it's like. Why don't we put AOC in there against Donald Trump? I mean,
put the actual Joe Walsh. More people know who he is.
It's August 25th, 2019. I mean, it's not the first primaries in January. It's not like. If you haven't raised money against the juggernaut that is the Trump machine now, you're not going to get the nomination. And this is a vanity thing, dog days of summer. Maybe he goes ahead with it. Now that David Koch has died,
right?
Maybe the next generation will front this. Maybe Scaramucci will be, effective raising money. Maybe. But you're up against a phenomenon here in Donald Trump, who already has raised a ton of money, is far richer than Joe Walsh. And as Donald Trump rightly points out, if you're wealthy and high income, you don't have a choice. You're going to put in these Nimrods. You're going to put the angry scold, fake Indian, Elizabeth Warren. You're going to put in Joe Biden, who was just up in New Hampshire saying how much he liked being in Vermont. And to a crowd of like 6 people.
Oh
And,
my
I mean,
God.
these are the front runners.
Guy just can't
You know,
get it together. It's like,
and
what
you got-
state are we in?
You got the Democrats fighting among. I mean, things could go bad. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying that I did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016. And I'm not saying that, he's perfect or that I like his tactics. I'm not happy with how much time it's taking him to make the case against the Clinton Foundation and to reform charity fraud. But I'm hopeful that he realizes and his team realizes it's an important thing, a must thing, and that he'll do it. But give me somebody. Put The Rock up, a movie star. Put somebody like
Dwayne Johnson versus Trump?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, that would be interesting. But
What about ASAP Rocky? He apparently dodged a bullet in Sweden.
yeah, but don't say to me that it's a serious idea that Hillary Clinton's going to sweep in and dry out of her Chardonnay vat and try to mount a campaign again and lose. Don't tell me. The only threat I think that the people haven't thought through carefully enough is the draft Michelle movement, and I think
I've been saying that since.
I know we're bringing it back up.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about that. There is a scenario. Michelle is enough of a global.
She's a
celeb.
political superstar, right? That's a name brand. Everybody's heard of her. I mean, it's not like, who is this? People who are not political know
Right.
Michelle Obama. And I'll tell you what I think she would do. If Michelle Obama ran, you would see a lot of non-voters, a lot of women,
Right.
a lot of men and women who are black, I think would vote for Michelle Obama simply to make her the first female president, the first black
Right.
female president,
Right.
and the opposite of Donald Trump. I think it would be a disaster,
Right.
but
No, I'm saying but don't say that you're going to have this balloon puppet Beto O'Rourke, spoiled brat, rich kid, never done anything, that he's seriously going to take on Donald Trump, because that's not going to happen.
when the balloon puppet video ended, it automatically went to our video. So we
Oh.
don't have the balloon puppet
We don't have the
video
balloon
handy
puppet.
anymore.
Oh.
Well, Charles, I presume that's the presentation for today.
Well, that's part 1. Now, part 2. No.
We went longer today, but
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for sticking with us and remind people that Crowdsource the Truth is brought to you by you. Can't continue the show without the sponsorship of the viewers. So even if you're only watching once a week on Sundays for Sunday with Charles, you can keep the show going by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and you're going to enjoy exclusive content almost every day of the week. I have special guests who come on. You're going to see shows on Patreon and Subscribestar that you don't get on any of the other channels that we're on, and you're going to keep the show going. You can also make a one-time sponsorship payment by going to paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. Charles, thanks for another great presentation.
Thank you.
I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a great night.